Dave, you gotta take a picture of me.
Everyone,
Hello. We've recently been having trouble with the go live with on YouTube. I don't know why. I thought I had it fixed. Well, at a minimum, people can watch on Zoom, and I might just have to go update the website real quick to say we're having trouble with YouTube again.
All right, are we ready to get started? Okay, I would like to call the May 18th, 2021 Oxford City Council meeting to order. Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bracken,
here.
Mr. Ellerby,
Here.
Mr. Prithers,
Here.
Miss Ragu,
Here.
Mr. Snavely,
Here.
Miss Southard,
Here.
Mayor Smith.
Here. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I so moved.
Seconded.
Moved by Vice Mayor Snavely, second by Councilor Southard. Ms. Eaton, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithers,
Yes.
Miss Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Miss Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, under public participation, we had the pleasure of participating in the unveiling of the statue to Mr. Wayne Embry this morning, and I would like to read the proclamation that goes along with that. Whereas Miami University is honoring NBA executive and basketball icon Wayne Embry, Miami 58, and his late wife Teresa, Terry Embry, Miami 60, with the Freedom Summer of 64 award today, Tuesday, May 18th, 2021, outside the main entrance of Millett Hall. And whereas the Freedom Summer of 64 award is bestowed each year upon distinguished leaders who have inspired the nation to advance civil rights and social justice. And whereas the Freedom Summer of 64 award is being presented to Wayne and posthumously to Terry, his wife of 62 years, to honor their lifetime of commitment to social justice, for breaking barriers, and for their mentorship. And whereas Wayne's success on the court and his achievements as a sports leader laid the foundation and provided inspiration to the generations who have followed him. Miami University President Gregory Crawford said, "From Terry's march across the bridge in Selma to her service to the community, she touched many lives and advanced social justice in all she did." And whereas a statue capturing Embry's likeness and signature hookshot will be unveiled after the ceremony, the statue, along with a Wayne Embry scholarship to support Miami varsity men's basketball student athletes, was created from private donations. And now therefore, I, Michael Smith, Mayor of the City of Oxford, Ohio, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, May 18th, 2021 as Wayne and Terry Embry Day in the City of Oxford. It is fitting and proper that Wayne and Terry Embry be honored this day with the Freedom Summer of '64 Award, as it recognizes the spirit of those 800 students who assembled in Oxford for the Mississippi Summer Training Sessions. And it is steeped in the belief that by understanding the past, we can build a more just and inclusive future. So really nice event today. I encourage everybody to visit the statue. Very impressive record. Now we'll move on to our presentation from Polco. I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Elliott for an introduction before we get into the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Basically, earlier this year, we hired an independent research firm, Polco NRC, to conduct a survey of services provided by the Oxford Police Division. And before I introduce our two presenters, I would like to say thank you to the many residents that participated in the survey, both those that were random sample chosen and those that still wanted to participate, even though they weren't randomly chosen, that completed the open participation part of the survey. So I do want to thank all the citizens that provided this information. It will help us assess our current services that we provide and provide us some feedback on how we can improve those services as well. I will share with you that the final report is available on our website, as well as this presentation that you're going to hear tonight. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce two people from Polco NRC. First is Laurie Urban, who is the Director of Client Services. And secondly, Michelle Kobayashi, who is the Vice President of Innovation. So with that, I'll turn it over to our two guest speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm actually going to be running my screen, but Lori will start talking, but I am going to share my screen now. And is everyone seeing it?
Yes.
Great.
Oh, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Sorry. This headset is too good. So Mayor and Council, thank you so much for having us here to discuss the results of the 2021 National Police Services Survey. We're really excited. Me in particular, I am a grad of Miami, was born in Oxford. So this is a community near and dear to my heart. So I was really happy to be a part of this study and to be able to present you all with these results. Michelle is going to run through the majority of the results. I'll be able to help answer questions and speak a little bit about the methods. I've worked for Polco and with National Research Center for 19 years this summer, and have managed almost all of the police services studies that we have done with Michelle's involvement as well. So I will let her take it from here.
Thank you, Lori. Yeah, thank you. We are so excited to be here today. I actually worked at the city of Boulder, Colorado, started my career 30 years ago as a researcher. And then after 7 years, helped form National Research Center. So for the last 25, 30-ish years, I've been doing surveys of residents for local government. And so that's my passion. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk to the city of Oxford because, and I'll talk more about this, this is a newer type of survey we've been doing, and just really excited for the cities who are the first to embrace this product and really kind of understand how important it is to reach out to residents at this time period to talk about issues with community and with policing and the community. So the national challenge, 2020 has been a really rough year, or was a rough year. 2021 may be getting us moving forward and better, but there's been a lot of chasms nationally. COVID affected us, turned our world upside down, basically mentally, physically, and economically. And we know that the issues that has happened with police departments is also on the national forefront of discussion and dialogue. So we know communities are facing unprecedented disruption. But those of us who have been working in local government know this is not new to the death of George Floyd. We actually knew there were demands on police personnel and budgets prior to COVID. We know that we do a national community survey, and we always ask residents, what are the most important issues in your community? And in almost every community, safety is one of the top 2 issues, along with economy. And so we know that people are always interested in what the police are doing and community safety in their communities. And we know prior to 2020, we already had issues with hiring police officers, getting police officers to apply and work with us, training police officers, and working on figuring out how police can work more in unity with communities. And then the last year, these issues have kind of really exploded. We have been measuring resident sentiment towards police for 20 years in our National Community Survey. And it used to be, when I first did the survey, police, the top services always in a National Community Survey that were rated the highest would always be fire, trash, library, and police. And that was about 20 years ago. In the last decade, we started to see that not in all communities, police were rated high. We saw in some communities, they're starting to drop low, and some communities very low. So we started thinking, hey, what's going on with the relationship between residents and their police officers? Simultaneously, we do a national employee survey where we ask local government employees, how do they like their jobs? How engaged are they? How satisfied? And what we found is uniformly, police officers tend to be the people who are least engaged and satisfied with their jobs and communities. So in 2017, we decided to develop the National Police Services Survey because we realized there started to be some disconnects in community policing and police officers with their communities and their satisfaction with jobs. So we worked with a bunch of experts, as well as looked at a lot of the surveys we had done for police departments. And then I did a significant literature search on all the types of things that police departments, divisions would be charged with. And that's when we developed the National Police Services Survey. In 2018 to 2020, we had actually worked with it more at a national level, trying to identify how residents felt about their police officers. And it's just been in the last 6-8 months that we've actually been administering in local communities. Oxford, I believe you're our 5th community to administer the survey. So you're really kind of a pioneer on the frontier of folks who are really interested in finding out what residents feel about their police officers. I know almost all communities are wondering these questions, but we know there's still a lot of communities hesitant to kind of get into these discussions. So again, want to applaud you guys as being a group that's really in the forefront of trying to measure that resident perceptions of police and try to work on these relationships in a way that a lot of communities are nervous to do so. With that, I'll let Lori tell you more about the methodology used for your MPSS.
Thanks, Michelle. So we, as Michelle kind of mentioned, we've done a lot of research to develop this tool, including involving local law enforcement experts from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, with the goal of this survey to help local governments, both cities and counties across the country, assess residents' perceptions of safety, gauge how police are viewed by residents and their interactions with them. Also help evaluate different public safety services, all the services that the police division provides in Oxford, as well as measure trust in the police department. We also help identify through the survey different safety priorities that residents may have for police over the coming few years. So for the city of Oxford, for the MPSS, we conducted the survey mostly in February and March of earlier this year. We mailed multiple invitations to about 3,500 households in Oxford that were randomly selected from all addresses from a list provided from the United States Postal Service. And we heard from about 467 respondents. That was a response rate of about 14%, which is about what we see on average for this type of survey. We also separately conducted, as Doug mentioned, an open participation survey. And this was a URL that the city could distribute via all of its communication channels to really give all residents in Oxford the opportunity to answer the questions and provide their feedback. For the scientific random sample survey, we do weight the survey results to reflect the adult community 18 years or older in Oxford overall, using a variety of demographics as well as the police district in which the resident lives, so that we can make comparisons by different demographics of respondents. As Michelle mentioned, we also were able to provide benchmark comparisons using those two national studies from 2018 and 2020. And Michelle will definitely get into some more details about that. The majority of this presentation is about the random sample survey, the open participation survey results, to which we had about 183 respondents, can be viewed separately on Polko's website or via Tableau, which is the data visualization software that we use. Next slide. This is just a map in case there are folks who are not familiar with the police districts in Oxford. There were 5 of them. We tracked where via the URL that respondents were asked to respond to the survey online. We tracked to which area so that we could provide breakdowns, because we know that different areas of the community tend to have different experiences, not just with police services, but with all services in a city. So we wanted to be able to provide those comparisons.
Great, I'll take over now. Just again, we developed this survey through a lot of work and working with a lot of experts and a lot of local governments and police departments, as well as literature. But what we really gauge in the survey is we want to look at the quality of life in the community, the sense of safety. What are the top community safety issues? We want to look at division performance, if people had contact with the police and what types of interactions they have had. And then also having them rate police officer performance, as well as community safety priorities. And so there's a broad range of topics, but we think it's a pretty inclusive set of what really makes up issues that would inform a community on how well they're doing and how they could kind of work with the police department. So in terms of safety, we asked residents how safe they felt in the city of Oxford. And what we found that is about 9 in 10 residents almost said they felt like the safety here was excellent or good. And that is a rating higher than we find for the national benchmark. We also asked them about various elements of safety, because we know it can vary by where you are in the community. And so we asked them about their neighborhood at day and night, the downtown and commercial areas at day and night, and then also the recreation facilities at day and night. And what we found is that for all 6 areas, you were at least the same as the benchmark. And in 2 areas, your downtown, you were higher than the national benchmark. And what we see is, which makes sense, everything at night drops down low, but we generally see that downtown commercial night dropping lower than you have in your community, which is nice. And we often see that recreational area shift as well. We asked about 34 safety issues. These are issues that police departments, divisions are charged with across the country, and asked residents how they felt about their safety in their community related to these issues. And these are the issues that we saw the top ratings, where we have more than 33% of residents saying that it's a major or moderate problem. The full report will show you the minor problems too. But also the arrows indicate where you are actually have more of that problem than what we found from other residents across the nation. So the areas where you actually have the people saying major or moderate problems in Oxford are underage drinking, sexual assault and rape, disorderly conduct, and drug abuse. About 6 in 10 residents are saying those are at least moderate problems in your community. We get about 5 in 10 residents saying driving under the influence is a problem. And then we get into the 40% about burglaries and theft, domestic violence, litter, hate crimes. And then the 33%, 1/3 of residents saying it's a major moderate problem in terms of poorly kept houses and racial issues. The arrows indicate where you have more. So you can see in the areas that were the biggest safety issues in your community, they were often above that, what we see in the national average. But the one thing that Lori has pointed out in your executive summary, and we'll talk about again, a lot of these areas are what we see. We've had other college towns do the survey, and they're ones where you might expect higher increases than you might in communities where there's much more older adults or much more less community and younger folks interacting. In the list of 34, there were about 9 issues who were actually lower than the nation. And those are things like mass shootings, gang violence, some of the real murder, some very significant crimes too. So you actually scored higher than the nation in those areas, or better than the nation. But these are the areas we want to focus on because they're areas where people feel the least safe. So when we compare you to the national benchmarks, what we found is in 11 areas, you were higher than the nation. 22, you were similar in terms of people's perceptions about safety. And 8 areas, you received more negative ratings. And those were the ones I just showed on the screen. We also then look at the quality of police services offered in the community. And what we find is we get about, we get close to 75% of your residents saying those services are excellent or good. And this is a score higher than the national benchmark. We also ask about 17 different specific services or charges that the police are charged or held responsible for in a community, what they're supposed to be doing. So we list those and ask residents to also rate the police on the scales of excellent, good, fair, poor. And the highest rating, these are ones where at least 75% of your residents gave your police division scores of excellent or good, are responding quickly to emergency calls for assistance, managing political protests, working to increase school safety, and maintaining public order. These were all scored very highly by your residents, and they're actually scoring higher than the nation. You also have lower rated services. That's where less than 60% say your police are doing a good job. Drug enforcement, inviting community members to collaborate on community issues, and then showing residents how to work together in neighborhoods. So you had fewer than 60% saying it, but you again are still scoring higher than the nation, because as a nation, we have not done a great job of having our community police departments interact and collaborate as well as maybe they should with residents. And that's maybe one of the outcomes we're seeing of what's been happening in the last year in our communities. We also get at public trust, which is a real big issue or hot topic these days. And so our police officers acting in the best interest in the community, are they doing the right thing? And what we found that 7 in 10 of your residents gave your police officers ratings, positive ratings in terms of these public trust issues. And in fact, all the ones we list here, you're actually higher than the nation. You also have 7 in 10 almost residents saying that the cops are a positive influence on the community and that you hold police officers accountable. So again, high scores in these areas, knowing that residents are expressing a lot of trust in your police officers, which is not a shared experience across the country today. We also kind of get more detailed and ask, like, if you had a contact with the police officer and what the reason was, because it's interesting to look at the data by those folks who've actually interacted with the police officer versus the perceptions of folks who may have read things in the paper or seen things on the national news of how you might rate your police officers. And what we found is about 6 in 10 of your residents have had interactions with police officers across the nation. That's not statistically significant from the benchmark, but usually the norm is closer to about 50%. So you have had a little bit more interaction. But when we ask folks why they have the encounters, a lot of them are more like they called or sought help, they're casual encounters, they reported a crime, but a lot of times it's this kind of more positive interaction with the police where the police are helping them. But we ask those folks who've had these interactions to rate that customer service, like with that interaction, not what you're seeing across the nation or what you're reading in the press, but how was that officer with you? And so what we found is about 7 in 10 residents rated police officers positively in terms of their knowledge, their timeliness of handling a situation, treating all people with respect, their responsiveness, and their resolution. And their overall impression was about 3/4 of residents gave the police officer they interacted with this rating of excellent or good. And all of these ratings were much higher than the national benchmark. So when we compare you to the national benchmarks, what we find is of the 34 areas we can compare you, 33 you received higher ratings than the nation. 1 you were similar, and that was treating all residents fairly. Again, not below the nation, but that's where you scored an average rating. And then in 0 places did you receive lower ratings than what we found in the national benchmark. So even though you've scored really highly and done really well in most of your ratings, we do see that there's disparities, and there's disparities across the nation too. It's not unique to Oxford. But what we know is not everybody experiences or perceives the police department or division in the same way as others. And so you guys had us do a disparity report so we can look at those differences. And there's more data in our report on this, and I'll show you some graphs following, but just some general trends is that the residents who reported higher levels of safety, they tended to be male. They tended to be older than 35 years. They tended to be white, from higher income households, and live in single family homes. Those folks reported feeling safer in the city of Oxford. When we start talking about police satisfaction and trust, we see kind of similar trends in most, except in terms of gender. We see that females tend to be a little bit greater satisfaction, at least with the overall impression of staff members. Respondents who gave higher ratings tended to be older. They tended to be white, from higher income households, and lived in single family homes. And again, these are trends we see across the nation. The one thing that is interesting is we have seen some disparities with females, males. We actually, in some communities, see males, and we see them nationally too. Males tend to rate police trust and their services higher. But on some of the things we looked at in Oxford, the females, either there's not a difference in gender or females tended to be a little more positive. But that's kind of an interesting side effect in your community that we don't see at the national level. And so now I'm going to show you some charts. So now you can see, here's the data by gender. You can see the females are in gold and the males are burgundy, or I don't know what you want to call that color. Like you can see, are some differences, but not a lot of them are huge in terms of spreads, because we're starting to talk about margin of errors, and we want to look at things where we're looking more at 7-10 points at least differently in our data. Now by age, and this is we see nationally too, there's big differences in age. Across the nation, we see young people tend to be less satisfied with their police and have less trust in them. And that's true in your community as well. Income, we see that lower income households, like I said, perceive the services and have lower trust in the police than we see with higher income households. And same thing with renter versus own. People always think rent versus own is kind of an interesting variable. It is for us because renting seems to be kind of a perfect storm of characteristics of young, more transient people who come into a community. And we see in general, they tend to have less trust in government and feel less positive about government in general. So we often break our data by that tenure variable. And we do see some of those differences in your community as well. And then, actually, one thing I should say, it's not a standard characteristic we have in the reporting of the MPSS, but the college student versus non. But we did do that analysis for you, and it's in the report. But what we found is that college students are similar to the young folks, a little bit more less trusting, rating quality a little bit lower, and feeling less safe. So they're kind of on line with younger residents, and it's hard to differentiate which of those variables is really the interesting one. But generally, we do have that data for you as well if you want to see that. But the final questions we have in the survey talk about resident safety priorities, and they're not asking folks like, should you solve murders? Because we know the essential services of police departments, people have to do, and they'll always tell you are important. We try to look at a list of services that are things that police divisions or departments can be a little bit, they have their own judgment about how much they spend in these areas. They're not like every police department in America has to solve murders. But we're talking more about things where you can place more emphasis or less emphasis. And what we found in Oxford was the highest rated of these kind of different areas is we still see a lot of residents really wanting more emphasis put on school safety and security. They also see an interest about the police division working to increase connections with the communities, working with the community to increase those kind of relationships and collaborate, and to solve neighborhood problems. They also want to see more information, again, about the police. So we're seeing this kind of trend of your residents really wanting to be more interactive with your police department when moving forward in terms of setting priorities and community safety. And like you said, you can see the list all the way down. But again, a lot of the issues are considered important. It's just those ones kind of top the list in terms of that resident community connection piece. And I will let Lori sum up because she wrote the conclusion section.
Thanks, Michelle. So these are kind of a summary of the results that you can find in the executive summary that's highlighted in the report. But overall, Oxford residents feel safe and tend to give high ratings to the services provided by the Oxford Police Division. As Michelle pointed out, as we expect in a community with a large university, some of the issues that we saw that rose to the top of the list of problems that residents felt are the most significant in the community included sexual assault, underage drinking, as well as disorderly conduct. And that these are more of a problem in Oxford compared to the nation as a whole. Trust in the Oxford Police Division is fairly strong among those who responded to the survey. And residents tend to prioritize school safety as well as kind of communication and resident police interactions with the city. And as Michelle kind of just went through with those disparities, we did see that not all residents share the same perceptions of the police. Those who are white, older, and non-students tend to give higher ratings to the police and aspects of the services they provide, as well as overall levels of safety within the community. I think that's all we have for you. So we are happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
All right, I'm juggling multi-screens here. So I see Councilor Ragu, so go ahead.
Of where the response is.
Chantal, you cut out at the very beginning.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I just have a question about if you have a breakdown of the responses based on a map of the different areas and who responded and where they lived, if you have any type of data that's aggregated like that. And then also, do you have a breakdown of the demographics that responded?
Yes, so we do have demographic breakdowns. Those should be in the full report. And we have breakdowns of demographics by all responses. So you can look at all those survey questions by age, gender, race or ethnicity, probably length of residency is in there. We do not map the survey results. It's with this survey in particular, and with most of our surveys, we like to promise that the results are confidential and anonymous, so they are not tracked in that way. We don't know that survey A came from household that lives at 123 ABC Street, but we know generally that the number of people who responded in each of the police districts, how many people responded in those, and those proportions also can be found in, there's a weighting table in the methods of the report that you can see that information.
And you can see the breaks then by those divisions as well.
Any other questions, comments?
Dr. Sutherland.
Hello.
What was that, Bill? I didn't hear you.
And Edna Southard would like
Oh,
to.
sorry.
speak.
Sorry, Edna, you're on my other screen. I'm flipping back and forth. Go ahead.
It's okay. I would like to know, you have, at several points, you pointed out that we are the fifth city to do the project with you. And so I wondered if you have compared our responses in terms of, and you also said that university towns have specific problems. We all know that. And so I wondered if you did compare the responses from that larger perspective.
We have not statistically or data-wise compared that. Lori's been doing all the reports, I've been doing all the presentations. So, but anecdotally, I can tell you that most of there's only been one university town that's done it specifically. We just know this data from other kinds of reports we've done over time. But the other university town did score the same, most of the same issues that you did in terms of the underage drinking, all those types of things. But they also did, similar to you, kind of receive positive ratings of the police, but just more issues in crime in those areas that have to do with having a lot of young people in your community. But our plan is to, once we get more than 5 communities, once we get 10, 20, we're going to start aggregating more of those data that are more recent and start putting those together. So you can actually, if you decide to do this survey again in a year or 2 years, we might even be able to say, compare us also to university towns. So it's not just the nation as a whole you're being compared, but I think those kind of data can be useful to you in the future.
So you do have follow-up plans.
We have follow-up plans to aggregate data, yes, because that's what we're always doing. We believe very strongly in benchmarks because when I first started working with the city of Boulder, I realized, you get a rating of 80% back as safety. Is that good enough? Like, should it be 95%? Should it be 70%? So we have a strong investment in the idea of benchmarks and comparing people. That doesn't mean your own comparison is the best. So if you decide to do the survey again in 2 years, that would actually be the comparison I'd like to see you focus on the most. Did you make improvements or change in any areas? But secondarily, looking at how other communities perform across the nation and communities that are like you, I think is a really good way to help you at least gauge where you stand and what areas might take more work or less work. And also just kind of decide if there are things that other people share with you. Like, I think what we've seen in the presentations I've given, because every single person who's done the MPSS has wanted a presentation. And all those presentations, everybody's kind of scoring high in that terms of community, need for community interaction and involvement. And we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of years. But I'm seeing a lot of interest in residents of that communication collaboration piece. So we're hoping too, by compiling these data, we can start to look at how people fare with that and kind of identify some of the best practices and where people are doing a good job.
Let me get Councilor Prithridge and Councilor Bracken, then I'll come to Assistant City Manager Green.
All right, first I want to thank you, and I want to thank Doug. When this was first mentioned, I didn't immediately see the need for it, and but I think that we often operate with not as much data as we could. We judge based on the measures that we have at hand, social media, our impressions, and having data is really helpful. And so my question is about the weighting, and I'm not a statistician, but I saw that there's an effort here to weigh, like we have a large student population, but they may not, for example, return as many of these as a household like mine might. So can you talk a little bit about the weighting and the methodology there? So how this can become representative of a population that's so diverse in terms of ages and who's going to respond and that kind of stuff.
Lori, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, sure. And Michelle, you can jump in and add whatever you need to. So definitely weighting is a best practice among our industry. It's something we do with all of our surveys because we know that different types of people and different types of households respond at higher rates to surveys. And you're absolutely right. Students tend to under-respond. Older adults, females, homeowners versus renters tend to respond at higher rates to surveys. So one of the things that we also did to kind of combat some of that disparity that we know happens in respondents is we sent more surveys to households that are deemed multifamily households. So we oversample those households because we know that they under-respond. We also weight to the census data for the community. For Oxford, we weighted to populations in households because we know that there's a large population in dormitories and they don't receive the survey. So we wanted to make sure they were excluded. We also know that during the time of data collection, I believe there was a large proportion of students who were, I think there was a lot of remote learning at that point. So whatever students were actually living in the community at that time were eligible to take the survey. And so we weighted by age, gender, tenure, so race versus, rent versus own, housing unit type, which is attached versus detached, as well as race and ethnicity, so that we can make sure that those are in the proportions as best we can of the what exists in the community. So you're right that students do under respond. Even if they had all been there, they would have probably responded at a lower rate. And we did talk a little bit about that with Doug and staff when we first started the survey, that the open participation survey would be a really great way to get student voice in when those students aren't actually living in the community at this time. So you can see differences in responses. If you look at the online reporting by students versus non-students, we had about 115 students that were mostly full-time, a handful were part-time, and then 350 non-students respond to the survey.
So just big picture, this is about making your sample more representative is what the weighting is about. So
exactly.
All right, so cool, thank you, I appreciate that.
Bracken. Did you have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you when you said that. Yeah, I had two questions. My first was, is response rate correlated with positive or negative opinions or experiences? Do you know that or have a sense of that at all?
We don't know that for sure. What we do know in terms of respondents, they tend to be people who tend to be a little bit more civically engaged overall for our surveys. What we did find in some of the open, so of the four, we just did a big analysis of the open participation surveys prior to yours because you weren't quite done because we just did a big talk for the American Association of Public Opinion Research. We did find that in 3 of the 4 communities, the open participation survey, the residents tended to be a little more negative than the folks that responded to the probability survey. Not a lot, but slightly a little bit more dissatisfied with police and less trusting. So that doesn't really tell you anything about response rate, but just to say the people who do participate tend to be more involved in the community. And whether that makes it so it's more representative, not sure, but that's the one thing we kind of do know. And so a greater response rate in our other surveys doesn't necessarily mean you'll be more positive or more negative. It just kind of depends on how the residents decide to respond.
Okay. My second question was, there seemed to be about a 20 percentage point discrepancy between white and non-white respondents and how they felt about policing locally. And I was wondering if you had any sense from the survey whether that was because of local personal incidents, or was that because of historical national beliefs, because we have a history of policing that can be troublesome that isn't necessarily local. So I don't know if there were anecdotes or responses that pointed to local issues and personal issues rather than national historic ones. Do you have any sense of that at all?
Lori, I don't know. I know we have an open-ended question, and that's one thing to look at, which I have not browsed because it was part of a separate document we sent to you. The one thing I could say, and I haven't done it myself, on the Polko platform, you can break the respondents of people who actually had an interaction versus the perceptions above and see if those race discrepancies still exist as much. My guess is they don't, but I have not looked at your data. But there's the ability on the platform to look at that. And I'm not saying, interactions with a specific police officer doesn't mean that that's still not a filter that someone has when they interact. But I think some people might argue that recent experience and them saying they had the experience versus perceptions overall might be a way to get you closer to understanding the difference there. But again, not a perfect way to disentangle. And it's hard for us to disentangle national events with what happens at a local level. One of the things we saw with the 2018 to the 2020 is we did see a big drop in trust and perceptions across the nation. And not all the activities were happening in these communities, but we do know at that time period, people's perceptions towards the police were negative when we did the 2020. We'll redo this survey and we're adding to our benchmark database. We're going to see if that's going to be a data point where trust remains low for a while, or how long it takes for that trust and those quality of services to kind of ramp back up. We're interested to see, but generally we do know the nation influences perceptions, and that's just one of the difficulties of being in local government is, everything that's happening nationally is happening to you, and residents not understanding the difference between the levels of government is also always an issue, right, as well. So we're hoping to monitor that over time, and that's why we keep changing our benchmarks. So if you do the survey again in a year or 2 years, the benchmarks might change too, because if we see that national perceptions have come back up from this kind of negative, from this kind of low after George Floyd, that will be reflected in what's happening nationally in the data we see.
Do you know offhand, I know it's in the report, what percentage of respondents had not necessarily negative experiences, but maybe weren't calling the police for help, but were getting ticketed or something like that?
I don't know offhand. Lori, do you know?
So there is a question that is a follow-up to, have you had contact? And then it's, why have you had contact? And there's a list of 10 or so different reasons. And so you could look at that. There are, I'm just scanning it really quickly. It looks like higher proportions of people had a casual encounter on the street with a police officer. About a third reported a crime to police, or 62% called or sought help from the police. So it's not, it doesn't seem like, they were arrested. 1% had reported that's why they were in contact with the police. So
I didn't think we'd have too many arrested, but I thought we might have some that interaction was, traffic ticket or something like that.
And that's what, you could look at the open participation, just, too, to see if more of those people came to the website that were angry with their interaction. We could see that in a community or not, but I haven't compared that, but you can compare the reasons for the interaction to see if your open participation got more people because they had interactions, or if it's just because, more people, like we talked about with the students, were interested in getting their voice heard. But that's another way to dig deeper into the data as well.
Thank you.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, my question is, we have a member of the PCRRC watching and has his hand raised. And we don't normally allow public comment during presentation. So I'm asking your thoughts, if we want to allow it or not.
Yeah, I would allow that from the PCRC.
Okay. Mr. Cron, go ahead.
Yes, hi, and thank you for allowing me to participate. First of all, I've seen your reports, and these are grade A reports. This is fantastic work. One of my questions is about the representativeness of the survey. I know that 14% responsive rate is pretty much what you got. Is that something that is normal for your surveys? So that's question number one. Question number two is, I saw that, and this is piggybacking off of Jason Bracken's, questions. The trust in the police, that's something that, our police department didn't do so well on. Is that something that you have seen in surveys that you have done since, the pandemic and George Floyd? Is that something that you've seen? Is that a trend, or is that something that's, unique to our department? And, so those are the two questions that I have. So.
Mr. Cron, I might need you to repeat your second question. You were cutting out a little bit.
So the second question is, I know that, I saw beforehand
You're cutting out again.
the survey
Sorry.
results, and so trust in the.
We lost you
Can
again.
you hear me?
I can hear you now, but you were coming in and out.
Oh, okay, I'm so.
Your audio is really choppy, Egon.
Okay, so yeah, no, I mean, so piggybacking off of Jason Bracken's question, it was more about the influence of social media and national media and
We lost you again.
media overall on the questions. Is this something that you have seen in results that you have received throughout since 2020?
Or you want to talk about response rates, and then I can talk about his second question.
Sure. So yes, the 14% response rate for a survey with this methodology, which was 2 postcards that were a half sheet of paper on cardstock mailed to households for online only response. The city did, if a resident called to request a paper survey, the city did mail the paper survey to the resident, and then that was entered into the online form. And there was maybe a dozen or so residents who requested that paper form. But the 14% response rate is pretty common of what we see for this type of survey administration method. We do see response rates declining over time, but for this specific method, we usually see between a 10 and 20% response rate.
And in terms of your question, Egon, about national trends and what we've seen so far with our survey data. So we've had 5 communities do the survey since we got the national poll back in the summer where we saw the big dips. And we have found with all 5 of them, pretty much they're doing better than the national sample. Some not as much. You guys are doing much better than some of the other ones, but we don't see it. Any of the communities so far, we have not seen drop below the national data, which was much more close to the George Floyd event. But what I want to say is I don't want to make a lot about that, because I do think the communities that are willing to ask the questions right now are the high performing communities. So I don't have the people who actually are having a lot of problems in their police departments knocking on our door to do the survey right now. So I don't want to conclude that perceptions are coming back up and everybody's more positive yet. I think it's probably more a characteristic of the people who've done the survey right now is what I would say. But ask us again in a year and we'll have a lot more data, and hopefully we'll get some more communities interested that are not having as positive relationships, and we'll see what that looks like. And we'll also plan to do our national panel survey again in a year or so we can see more of that.
Mr. Elliott.
Yeah, before we close out, I just our open-ended question was, what is the single biggest improvement the Oxford Police Division could make to positively impact the quality of life in the community? And yes, they did provide us those. And I can share with you, I went through them. There's not a consistent pattern. That responses are wide and varied, and we'll probably utilize a student this summer to help us sort of develop a report on these. They're very interesting. One that caught my eye was we need a citizens review board which I guess we didn't do a very good job of advertising the PCRRC to this individual. So, but there's some interesting answers to that question.
All right. I would just like to thank staff for putting this together. This was something I think, felt strongly about, and we certainly have a lot more data than we had 5 months ago. So I think we see some areas going forward we can work on. So thank you for your help, and I'm sure we will do another survey at some point in a year or two. So thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I would like to move on to our second presentation, which is our draft inventory of local government and community-wide greenhouse gas emissions. And I believe Ms. Carly Duvall from our IES Professional Services team is going to present this. So Ms. Duvall, I hear great things about you, so I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm a graduate student from Miami. I'm in the MEN program in IES. And this past semester, myself and my team as a PSP project helped the city of Oxford do a greenhouse gas inventory for calendar year 2019. And I'm going to share my screen. Maybe if I can figure it out. Okay, I think yep, okay. Here we go. Okay, so yeah, my name's Carly Duvall. The rest of my team members, we were with Joseph Trevette, Ricky Oriana, and Sumbo Olafureni. I never say his last name right, but sorry. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do was give you a brief overview of the presentation. So the first thing for the presentation is we're going to go over the City of Oxford's LGO findings. Then we're going to go over the City of Oxford's community scale findings. Then we'll have a brief discussion of the results in the community scale findings. And then after that, we're going to go into the recommendations for the future inventories.
Not a little bit, Kelly.
Oh, I'm cutting out. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You're good.
Okay.
Yes, you're good.
Okay. So the first thing I wanted to do was explain the difference between the two inventories that we created. So the first inventory was on the local government operations, which is abbreviated LGO. And this is going to include anything that comes from a government owned or operated building, such as government buildings, street and traffic lights, city vehicles, and the employee commute for employees. And then solid waste, water, wastewater from municipal sources. And we did this greenhouse gas inventory in cooperation with the parameters set forth by the Global Covenant of Mayors. But the Global Covenant of Mayors does not require the LGO inventory, but we chose to include it because it's more comprehensive and it gives you a better idea overall of where emissions are coming from specifically. And the LGO is a subset of the community scale. So the community scale is going to be any emissions created in the entire community of Oxford. And that's going to be residential, commercial, and industrial electricity, as well as government building electricity, and then vehicle traffic. And that is going to include any kind of traffic in the city of Oxford. And then solid waste, water, and wastewater. And these are from all the sources mentioned above. And this is required by the Global Covenant of Mayors, unlike the LGO. And this also does include the LGO in it though. And as you can see here in this little diagram, the community scale is the biggest part of the inventory, and then the LGO is a smaller subset. Okay, so now we're gonna look at the LGO results for calendar year 2019. So as you can see, the total emissions for 2019 were 7,504 metric tons of CO2e, that's CO2 equivalent. And the biggest piece of this was water and wastewater at 45%. The second largest piece was solid waste at 31%. And then buildings and facilities was 10%. Vehicle fleet was 6%. Streetlights was also 6%. And then the employee commute was 2%. Okay, and now we're going to look at the community scale emissions. Okay, so prior to completing the community scale inventory, my team researched different cities. I think we researched 13 different cities in the US and conducted basically case studies to figure out which sectors of the community scale inventory were the most influential in each of their inventories. And that is because trying to do all of these, first of all, it takes additional data that we didn't have, particularly for the consumption-based. And then these other categories, we presume to be pretty negligible for the city of Oxford, as well as in the case studies. These were not all guaranteed to show up in each of the city's inventories, but these top 4, energy, residential, commercial and industrial, transportation, solid waste, and water and wastewater, these were in all of the case studies that we read. So we decided that we would focus on these. So for calendar year 2019, the total amount of emissions was 233,059 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And the biggest piece of this was the commercial energy at 60%. Then the second largest was residential energy at 16%. Then transportation was 13%. Solid waste was 8%. Industrial energy was 2%. And then water and wastewater was only 1%. Okay, there we go. Okay, so as you can see here, this slide is discussing the complications we had with energy in the commercial or in the community scale. And one of the issues we ran into was that Glenwood provided us with commercial energy use for their for natural gas, and that's in MMBTUs. So it's not the same as the CO2 equivalent we saw on the other slides. But as you can see, commercial energy was 643,758 MMBTUs, but Miami being included in that was a huge piece of that total. It was nearly 500,000 MMBTUs, and then other commercial sources, excluding Miami, were roughly 170,000. And then for Duke Electricity, Duke provided this data as OPA, which is Other Public Authority, and that includes Miami and the LGO, so municipal and government buildings. And then Duke also provides streetlights and other commercial. But you can see here that OPA is a huge amount in comparison to the other sectors here. It's 187,432,233 kilowatts per hour, as opposed to the other sectors, which are much smaller. And that is majorly because of Miami being included. So that's a complication that we ran into. So then this is the transportation sector for the community scale. The total emissions for this were 30,737 metric tons of CO2e. And the largest portion of this, almost all of it, was passenger vehicles at 93%. Then heavy trucks were 3% and light trucks were less than 1%. So a complication we ran into here was we got vehicle mile travel data from both ODOT and OKI. And as you can see, ODOT gave us almost 50 million miles and OKI gave us almost 80 million miles. So there's a 30 million difference between the mileage here. And that is because OKI data captures more streets within the city of Oxford. And here you can see the two different maps. So this is the map from ODOT, and this circle here indicates this is the only area that they were capturing street data from for mileage, whereas OKI is capturing all of these streets within this red circle here. So there's clearly a lot more mileage that's going to be captured because of this boundary. So this slide shows us the solid waste at the community scale level. And for 2019, the total emissions were 22,107 metric tons of CO2e. And the biggest piece of this was 49% of commercial solid waste. And then the second largest was residential at 38%. The closed landfill was 9%, and collection and transportation was 4%. And just specifically with the closed landfill was the majority of the emissions in the LGO for the same sector of solid waste. And as I mentioned before, the LGO is encompassed within the community scale inventory. So just for comparison, the closed landfill was the majority of the emissions before in the LGO, and it's only a fraction of the emissions in the community scale. And that's specifically from methane being released. And then also some of the data that we got specifically, I believe, for residential, possibly for commercial too, was for waste that's being collected by Rumpke outside of Oxford city limits. I believe there were 4 locations total where Rumpke was collecting solid waste that were encompassed within this total. And additionally, Miami's solid waste is included in this total value, most likely under the commercial section again. And it might be calculated using a different method. So that's something that we are gonna have to figure out in the future. So this slide shows us the water and wastewater of the community scale. And the 2019 emissions were 2,947 metric tons of CO2e. The largest piece of this was the wastewater treatment plant at 45%. Then the second largest was the water treatment plant at 39%. BREC was 11%. Then N2O from effluent discharge to rivers and estuaries was 2%, and N2O from wastewater treatment was also 2%. Yeah, just like with solid waste, some of the treatment plant services were outside of the city limits as well. I believe there were 2 total locations outside of city limits. So those were encompassed within this total. And because most of the water treatment, most of the wastewater treatment and water treatment is occurring within municipal or government-owned buildings, the values that we entered into ClearPath, the tool we use to calculate these emissions, is pretty similar for both the community scale water and wastewater and the LGO water and wastewater. And that's simply just because most of the emissions are coming from government-owned buildings. Okay, so our recommendations for the future inventories, we have them in 2 different sections. One is for the LGO. So for the LGO, we feel like reviewing data collection methods for consistency would be really helpful. An example of this is with the electricity spreadsheet. Some of the addresses were not accurate, and sometimes there were addresses that covered more than one location. So some clarification in those things. And then some of the data on spreadsheets were different than the data collected from individual employees. So just consistency in that. And then updating the employee commute survey. So in the employee commute survey, the way that it was formatted, employees were allowed to type in their own answers or responses. And sometimes the responses that they used were not able to be used in our data collection for one reason or another. They just weren't within the parameters that we needed them to be in. So having drop-down choices in the survey sheet would be much easier and much more consistent. And then reevaluating the use of the employee data entry sheets. So for this particularly, we have the example here of water and wastewater. So water and wastewater data was provided on multiple different sheets, but sometimes the sheets would overlap, sometimes the data would be different, and it would just depend on the department that was giving the responses. And so having one sheet per department or one sheet total for one person to fill out would be beneficial. And then also electricity for water and wastewater was provided twice. And this was again, based on these two different sheets we had. We had a sheet for electricity that had all the accounts, and those numbers were different than the values we got from the water and wastewater survey sheets. So we had to clarify that. And then on the community scale, defining the data collection boundary. So we had some trouble trying to figure out how to align the boundaries of the data that we got. For example, here, natural gas from Glenwood was provided by the city limits, but electricity was provided by zip code. And so and just as you saw with OKI and ODOT, those boundaries were different just based on their own measurement. So trying to clarify those boundaries and have them be consistent will help future teams to make sure that their data is being calculated at the same scale. And then standardizing contact procedures with third-party data providers. So this is referring to the city maintaining correspondence with data providers, specifically with people like Duke, Glenwood, potentially ODOT or OKI. We just feel like for future teams, it might be best if the city has kind of a point person to do contacting for these types of things, because utility companies might respond more efficiently to you. And then the last thing is to explore the other sectors that I mentioned previously. Upstream activities was one of them, as well as the consumption-based. Then forestry was another sector that we didn't get to explore in this semester, but might be worth looking into later on. Okay. So that's everything I have. I'm open to questions now.
All right. Hey, Carly, could you unshare your screen? It'll make it easier
Yeah.
for me to keep track of everybody and see hands. So let me get Councilor Ragu, and then I'll get, it was Jessica first.
If I could just really quickly, I should have done an introduction just like Doug did. I would be remiss if I did not extend a huge thank you to the student team. I've worked with them all semester, and I am thrilled with their professionalism, their attention to detail, and we've learned so much about the value of clean data, what we need to do better, and what an amazing foundation they've built for us. So I just wanted to go on record and say that before we got to questions, because I feel it's really important. And Carly is presenting for her entire team, which, you know, a lot of people did lots of different parts last time. So well done. Thank you, Carly.
Thank you.
All right. Now we'll go back to Councilor Ragu.
Really good, Carly.
Thank
Really
you.
good presentation. I have a couple questions and a
Okay.
comment. Whenever you were talking about solid waste, what is your definition of commercial? Does that include apartments? Is that when they're large apartment complexes, or what does that mean?
So commercial, as far as I understand it, commercial is going to be anything including, well, it included Miami, and then it's also going to include like retail stores and private businesses. And it may also include apartments, but I believe the apartments are actually under the residential.
Okay. And then for the wastewater treatment plant, is that from methane emissions, or is that from electricity production?
It is from, I believe it's from both. So well, no, that's wrong. I misspoke. The electricity is all encompassed within industrial or commercial energy. So for water and wastewater emissions, that is specifically coming from the N2O processes to treat the water, and then digester gas from combustion, and Also, yes, methane.
Carly, could I jump in?
Yeah.
This is Susie Zizicki.
Susie.
I do think when you broke out the pie for water and wastewater, that included the electricity. So the majority, because I think you broke out N2O.
Yeah.
So when you show the pie for water and wastewater, that would,
yes,
electricity would be built into that. And
yeah,
so,
sorry everyone, I apologize. Yes.
yeah,
the
it's a lot of data to look at. Yeah, but I think that that's part of it's mixed. The tool that we used was something called ClearPath that puts buildings, electricity and natural gas for most buildings in one sector. And then it puts electricity and natural gas for water and wastewater in the water and wastewater component. And then it just depends on how you play with the data to produce the pie graphs. But I do think the one you showed included electricity.
Yeah, that I feel like there's such a huge opportunity there. I mean, this is such a special night for environmentally conscious people for this and then what's to come. And I think that there's so much we can do in the wastewater treatment plant to try to collect the methane and try to harness that into electricity. You know, one of the grad students who came before you did a whole project on methane capture at wastewater treatment plants. And I think that's something that, although we're capturing a small amount of it for use at the plant for electricity, it just shows that there's such a capacity and more that we can do. And so I think this is great. It really gives us a great jumping off point.
All right. Mr. Prithridge.
So having worked with and sat in on the presentations for this team in terms of the process, the product that you see in its professionalism reflects the professionalism in their process. And to me, having had two presentations, one from a professional consultant and one from a graduate student, if you did a blindfolded test, you would have some trouble detecting which one was a student project and which one was professional, because they were both professional. And the value that we have in the Institute for the Environment Sustainability to do this kind of work for us from Miami is just an incredible asset, that we really have a great inventory that, as Councilor Ragu says, I mean, it's a two-part thing. You have to know, you have to know what you're, whether it's with the expression about like, you have to measure it before you can manage it. And we now have a measurement that we can manage, and that helps us going forward. So thank you to Susie and all of your team members, and thank you to council and staff for putting this on the agenda, because it's just really important, and thank you.
All right. Anyone else? I'm going to echo those comments. I can't say how happy we are that you accomplished this task. And again, how, that I didn't realize some of the challenges you were going to face in the data collection, and that's outstanding that you identified them and you made them understandable for a layperson such as myself to be able to realize that. That goes a long way with the public. I see Mr. Snavely. Would you like to make a comment?
I just wanted to congratulate the team and especially recognize Susie Zizicki, because she leads these teams and helps them and nurtures them along, and she is indispensable, and we really appreciate you, Susie.
All right.
Thanks, Bill.
Well, a great job. We can't express enough how happy we are with the outcome, and it'll give us some place to move forward. Oh, I see Councilor Southard.
Yes, I will repeat the thanks, which I also want to express. But I one of the things that you mentioned that kind of stuck out is the roll-in of Miami, and that's that seems to be a big problem, perhaps. Is there any way to resolve that or to address that issue? Because 60% of commercial energy, and that includes Miami. So I just wondered if there's any way to resolve this problem, or whether you perceive it as a problem.
So we did a minimal amount of trying to aggregate the data and separate Miami from, I believe we tried to do it with solid waste, electricity, and water and wastewater. But it is challenging to separate those kinds of data points and records. I believe that the City of Oxford is going to be working with Adam Sizemore and Susie and the future PSP team to work more on that. My team, we conducted the LGO and the CS inventory for this year. And then I believe future teams are going to be working on trying to separate Miami's data from the community scale. And I do think it is possible, at least with some of the sectors. The one that really presents a big challenge to me is transportation. So that one might be a little tricky, but that's just my opinion.
Can I add a little bit that, oh, is it? The university has done years of greenhouse gas inventories. And so I think they're getting a pretty good handle on how to calculate their own emissions. So I think it's not perfectly easy, but I do think that we're going to be able to work really well with them to figure out different methodologies and then how to, segregate the information. And since the presentation, David Prithridge and Adam Sizemore and I have already met to just talk about the transportation components and how do you move forward with figuring out how OKI did their methodology versus how Miami's doing their methodology. And David, I don't know if you want to speak any more about that, but the conversations are happening. Adam Sizemore is aware of the issues, and the university has its own climate action task force who's drafting their own climate action plan at the same time. So I think that something that's really special about Oxford is this collaboration between the university and the city. You're following parallel pathways and you're intersecting so much throughout this time. So I think it's going to be a pretty special opportunity for the two entities to set an example for other cities across the country.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all. It's
Thank you,
great work.
everyone. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thanks.
On behalf of everybody.
Carl.
Susie.
Nicely done.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to public comments. To anyone who wishing to address council about items not on the agenda or on the consent agenda, please state your name and address for the record. Do we have anyone?
We do. Let's do Mr. Rudolph. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. And good evening, Mayor Smith and City Council and City Administration. This is Mike Rudolph from 200 Morgan Circle. Just wanted to make a real brief comment about an impact that you all have had this year on the move out of our Miami students. This morning, I received on my Facebook post a memory that it was exactly 1 year ago that I posted on the Miami University Parents and Family Members Facebook page about the incredibly disgusting mess that the Miami students and parents left on move out last year. We always know this is a difficult sight to see, but last year was just a particularly awful mess. And I wanted to send a shout out to you all this year there at the city for providing those 9 locations with large Rumpke waste disposal dumpsters to help mitigate some of the mess. And there's certainly more that we can do, I know, going forward, but I do appreciate you addressing this ongoing issue. It certainly helped as I drove around town this morning. We were gone all weekend, but to see those dumpsters full and know that those dumpsters were full of things that could otherwise have been spread out across the street and on the sidewalks and make the job for the Rumpke employees so much more difficult. Just wanted to express my thanks for that and hope that we can continue to work on this issue to certainly help keep Oxford a beautiful place that we like it, and maybe somewhat avoid this as we go forward. So thank you again for your help with that, and thank you for the comments.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rudolph.
Next, we have Ms. Shaman. Oop. Sorry, Amy, I muted you on accident. Go ahead.
Amy?
Ms. Shaman, we can't hear you.
I'm still showing her as mute. There we go.
I'm
Unmuted.
sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you for your patience. My apologies. So wanted to comment, Amy Shaman, 11 Heather Ridge Court. Wanted to comment briefly on the 2 surveys and to thank you for engaging the groups in doing them. My question for council is how you plan to use them. Do you have a period of time in which you review the results beyond the discussion you just had? And then should we as a city expect that if there were policy changes or practice changes based on them, that would be reported at a particular time? Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to continue to look at those reports and figure out how we're going to fit those into our policy and where we're going to go moving forward. We haven't, as of yet, determined how we're going to do that, but we will do that.
I do not see any other hands at this time.
All right. Then I will move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Oh, yes, you do. I move it.
Moved by Vice Mayor Snavely. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Councilor Southard. Any items to be removed from the consent agenda tonight? All right, seeing none. Ms. Eaton, will you call the roll to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Pritchard.
Yes.
Ms. Bragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, we will move on to resolutions. Ms. Eaton, you may read the first resolution whenever you're ready.
A resolution confronting the climate crisis by establishing community-wide greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets towards a sustainable carbon neutral Oxford.
All right, may I have a motion to adopt? Motion by Mr. Pritchard, second by Mr. Bracken. And I'm going to turn this over to Councilor Pritchard.
Okay, I asked for this to be on the agenda, but this is really me just asking that recommendations of one of our appointed boards, the Climate Action Steering Committee, be on our agenda. So what I'd like to do is we have a short presentation. I know there have been a lot of presentations tonight, but this is a big commitment, so we want to explain the rationale. And so let me share my screen real fast. And I'm going to be here presenting with Mark Boardman, Dr. Mark Boardman, who is an emeritus professor from Miami, who I'll be presenting with. So let me see. Okay, so again, I'll turn this over to you, Mark, and then we'll tag team the presentation.
Okay, this is Mark Boardman, at part of the Oxford Climate Action Steering Committee. Let's go to the next slide. The data demonstrating global climate change are not new. These data of global surface temperature are robust and overwhelmingly agreed upon by scientists, world organizations, and world governments. Predictions from decades ago have come true. These data are compelling that climate is changing. Next slide. Huge amounts of greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, have been added to the atmosphere in recent years. It is well established that adding greenhouse gases to the atmosphere causes temperature to rise, and it is also clear that the specific source of this increase of greenhouse gases is human activity. Next slide. We are already experiencing climate change. For example, and this is just an example, in the past 30 years, temperatures across the United States are about 1 degree Fahrenheit higher than a century ago. Climate change either is or is becoming a climate crisis. Next slide. The central question that should concern us now are, what are we going to do? What will our legacy be? If we continue doing what we've done before, business as usual, we can expect catastrophic climate change. If we do not something to curb greenhouse gases and mitigate negative effects of climate change, that can happen. We need to act fast, but it's not too late. Next slide. And we are doing something. The city of Oxford has not been idle. In 2018, a task force was created leading to the recommendation that the city align itself with the goals of the Global Covenant of Mayors and the multi-stage process of climate action that this covenant delineates. Next slide. In 2019, City Council accepted this recommendation and pledged the city of Oxford to the goals of the Global Covenant of Mayors. The political commitment for climate action was made. Next slide. In 2020, Council created the Climate Action Steering Committee to assist the city in meeting the goals of the Global Covenant of Mayors. Representation on the Oxford Climate Action Steering Committee includes monthly meetings, including council members, city staff and boards, Miami University, and the community. Communication with community organizations has been established, and the first of several public fora has occurred. Next slide. The steering committee is operating under a 3-year timetable. Our first year included assessing Oxford's current climate impact. In our second year, we are assessing the risks and vulnerabilities that climate change is likely to impose on Oxford. Also, one of the tasks assigned to the committee by council was to recommend to council specific greenhouse gas targets to meet the goals of the Mayor's Covenant, and we make those recommendations tonight. In year 3, 2022, we will assist the city boards, staff, commissions in creating and implementing climate action plans. This will be done with significant public communication, and we hope to add to the integration of climate action to the broader planning process. Next slide. Tonight, we present a resolution to the City Council that includes recommendations for targets of greenhouse gas reductions. Let me first tell you the recommendations, and then David will explain the rationale for how we got there. The specific goals we present tonight are ambitious, but doable. They include a 50% reduction over the 2019 baseline that we just heard by 2030, a 90% reduction over the 2019 baseline by 2040, and by 2045, the target that we are recommending is that we have community-wide net neutrality. The focus will be on the major sectors that you've already heard from the previous presentation: energy, buildings, transportation, waste, and water. And this will apply to emissions within the city. We'll try to exclude Miami as best we can. So now I'll turn the presentation over to David. He will better describe how these targets can be met.
Okay, and this is a leap, but it's not without having looked first. So what the Climate Action Steering Committee has been doing for the last year since appointment has been doing research. We've been reviewing the climate science, which I'll touch on. We'll talk about some of what our other peers have done, so we know that we have company, and to think about what are the assumptions and best practices that give us the confidence that this actually is achievable. So real quickly, the climate science is really clear that if we want to limit the catastrophic effects of climate change, society basically has to be net neutral by 2050, which then also means we need to reduce by 50% by 2030. So hence the recent goals out of the White House. So the climate science kind of gives us our marching orders. It's not that debatable. So what have other cities done confronting this same challenge? And we've been doing some research, building on what we started back in the task force a few years ago, reviewing those other small city signatories to the Global Covenant, many of which are about our same size. Real quickly, just some of the terminology. You can do two things when the set goals. One is what we call baseline goal, which is you say, this is where we are at the baseline, like 2019, we want to achieve a percentage reduction goal. The other potential goal is a fixed level goal, which is you just say, we want to get somewhere. So a majority of communities, and it's sometimes hard to determine what their goals are, but to the degree that we can, have baseline goals and some have flat out neutrality goals. So what year have they set? Well, most use a baseline goal, and most are saying something like 80% by 2050. In states like California, that's kind of state law. Others have picked neutrality from years as early as 2030 to as late as 2055. Park City, Utah wants to be neutral by 2030. Most communities are ranging around 2050. The question you have to ask is, are you just committing to your local government operations, or are you also committing the community wide? Most communities, most cities have committed the entirety of their community, of which their governmental operations are a subset. And so what kind of plans did they develop? And this is kind of the next stage that the city will have to confront. Is many of them have standalone climate action plans. Some of them have sustainability plans, but the interesting ones, I think, are those that weave it directly into the comprehensive plan. And the timing is perfect there because we're in the middle of that process over the next year or two. So that's what other people have done, but does that really give you the confidence that you can do it? Well, some of the assumptions that the Climate Action Steering Committee are operating under is that we're not going to have to do this alone, that there will be national scale shifts to renewable energy on the grid, and that there will be more incentives for people to produce renewables, for example, on their own roof. So we're optimistic about that. But as we've been talking about in the city already, we can produce energy renewably locally, which would help. Electrification is a big topic because if you can switch from non-renewable sources like oil or natural gas to electricity and then make the electricity renewable, you can get to zero. In your buildings, same thing. If we can shift our buildings to renewable energy through the grid and local, then that can help buildings get neutral. But many communities are then trying to make their buildings net zero through standards of incentives or regulations, and again, through things like electrification. So if you have a heat pump that operates off electricity and that electricity is renewable, you can zero out the building's HVAC system. It's hard to retrofit old buildings, but furnaces eventually die. Transport communities we are going to see the electrification of the national fleet. Even companies like General Motors that fought fuel efficiency standards have committed to neutrality in their fleet by 2035. And there will be a vast improvement, we're confident, in infrastructure for public, for electric vehicle charging. And some of the changes we saw with telework are going to help us too. But again, locally, we can do some of the things we're already been doing, promoting alternative forms of transportation, and we can start helping create the infrastructure to support electric vehicles. Waste, some of the things, the advances in recycling and zero waste, and some of the things that we can talk about is that methane at our landfill. We can do something about that. We can improve upon, expand composting, for example, in partnership with our community members. And as Councilor Ragu noted, if we can switch renewables to at the wastewater treatment plant, but also things like methane capture, we can drive down those things too. And city staff has been working hard on efficiency for a long time there already. So that brings us again back to the resolution, and I'll turn it back to Mark since he's the chair of the steering committee.
We know what the problem is. We know what we need to do, and we also know how to do it, how to address the problem. Working within the framework of city government, staff, boards and committees, and working with the community, concrete steps can be made to confront the climate crisis. Setting targets for greenhouse gas reduction is a significant first step to provide guidance for climate actions that the city can make to meet the commitment made via the Covenant of Mayors. So the Oxford Climate Action Steering Committee recommends that City Council establish these climate action targets in the associated resolution. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
So that's all of our presentation, and I know about staff, whether they have thoughts, and turn it back over to the public, and I'll stop sharing.
All right. Let me ask if there's anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution before council.
There is. Ms. Blackmar, go ahead.
Hi, this is Carla Blackmar Rice. I live at 400 West Vine Street in Oxford, Ohio. I wanted to express my appreciation for the work of the Miami students who presented earlier, of our climate steering committee, and Dr. Boardman and Dr. Prithridge tonight. Excellent work on the inventory, and I wanted to express my strong support for the targets that are being proposed tonight. I feel that they are attainable. I agree that we will be seeing national shifts that will enable them. And I think that we're, as a learning community that is trying to set an example for the students of the future, this is a great opportunity for us to continue to lead as a community where people will go forth and hopefully be implementing these types of practices in other places. So thank you again, and I strongly support advancing these targets.
Thank you.
Next, we have Miss Joan Potter Summer. Go ahead.
Hi there. As a member of the Climate Action Steering Committee, I would like to say how much I appreciate and value working with the committee members, the professional service project students, their advisors, and the city staff. The efforts of the group are based on science and earnest decision-making. Oxford has made a commitment through the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy to address climate change on a community-wide basis in order to support worldwide efforts to mitigate climate change. It is really important that the community members come together and support these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do not see any others at this time.
All right. I see Councilor Ragu's hand.
Well done. Good work. This is awesome. I am in complete support. Just good job. Good effort.
Vice Mayor Snavely.
I agree. This is a great report and a great goal setting for us. I appreciate that Mark and David have talked about these as being attainable goals, but I don't think they're easy goals. And I think it's really going to put a lot of pressure on us to meet our own goals. And that's good. And that's what we need to do our part. Hey, in Oxford, we are not going to solve the world's problems, but we need to handle our part of those problems. And I think we can do that. So I commend Mark and the rest of the committee for the work that you've done. Aces.
Councilor Southern.
Not to repeat what's been said, but I also think it's just wonderful. And as somebody who has solar panels on her roof, and I have, this also makes not only global and environmental sense, it makes economic sense. I mean, my electric bills are $5 a month about. So just saying, this makes a lot of sense for everybody. We all need to pull together, and I hope that we can achieve this for ourselves, for our community, and for our children and grandchildren.
All right, Councilor Ragu.
I know that once the federal government kind of gets its butt in gear, this is going to be so much easier, but they're going to need us kind of being the boots on the ground. So what an advantage to be so much further ahead, and they can catch up and help us, take us the rest of the way. And I think that, the important thing is that we all have a role to play in this, when it comes to policy of density of housing and land sprawl, when it comes to, do we have encouraged landlords to provide a mattress per occupant so that we're not throwing away mattresses every single year? There's so much we can do in the policies that we create that can help us achieve these goals. So I think it's awesome to have a very clear indicator that this is the point, that we cannot live outside of our means of our environment, that everything must rest within that ceiling.
Again, great presentation. And I think the Vice Mayor hit it on the head. In the words of President Kennedy, we do not do these things because they're easy. We do them because they're hard. And anybody who may be a little apprehensive about this, I'll admit I was too, but I think we can do this. And even if we don't quite get to where we need to be in 9 years, we're going to be a lot closer. And who knows, we may exceed our goals in that amount of time. We have a very capable city staff. So I'm in full support of this. And if there are no more questions or comments, I think we're ready to vote. Ms. Eaton, would you call the roll?
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. That resolution is adopted. We'll move on to our second resolution. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to close the south side of Lot 52 each Tuesday from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. to permit the operation of the Tuesday Farmers Market within Lot 52 from May of 2021 through May of 2022.
All right, may I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Southard, second by Counselor Prithridge. And I will turn this over to City Manager Elliott.
You're muted, Doug.
There we go. I'll just make a few comments. I apologize for that. Because Larry Slocum is also with us tonight, and he is the market manager for the Oxford Farmers Market. This request is to expand the market. This would be uptown, Lot 52, the south portion of Lot 52. As you know, they were operating at the TJ Maxx parking lot, and they've decided they'd like to be at uptown. So this is a recommendation to utilize the southern portion of Lot 52 on Tuesdays. And I'll turn it over to Larry to see if he has anything that he'd like to add, and we'd be glad to answer any questions council has.
No, Doug, you said it perfectly well. Thank you. Now just answer any questions.
All right, let me ask if there's anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution before council.
There is not. Thank you.
All right, council questions and discussion. Mr. Prithridge?
So this is, I'm super excited about this, and this is kind of, to me, this is like one of these ways you can think globally and act locally. Local food in a walkable location in the heart of our community, where a car is normally parked, is actually, I'm very excited that this will be back uptown, where Tuesday nights uptown, it's a great thing for our community, for our economy, and for our local farm community. So thank you to the Oxford Farmers Market.
Thank you, David.
Mr. Snavely?
So just a question. The resolution says the south part, so that's the part closest to the park. Is the rest of it going to be allowed to have regular parking then?
Yes, sir. We'll have that all. We'll have that all.
I was really asking the city manager.
That's
Oh,
okay.
sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, but that's our intent. The northern portion will be open for parking.
All right. Any more questions or discussion? All right, Ms. Eaton, you make, oh, wait, Councilor Southern, do you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to say how great this is. And it not only keeps people uptown, but it also simplifies life. It makes, the market is uptown at that lot on 2 days. I think it's all much easier for people to remember. And it's all walkable. So I think you'll get more traffic. I think it's great.
Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. Resolution is adopted. So we will move on.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. We appreciate it. We'll move on to our third resolution. Ms. Eaton, you may read that whenever you're ready.
Resolution repealing the City of Oxford revolving loan fund rules and procedures and adopting new City of Oxford revolving loan fund rules and procedures.
All right, we have a motion to adopt.
Move adoption.
Adoption by Vice Mayor Snavely, second by Mr. Prithridge. And I will turn this over to Assistant City Manager Green.
Good evening. Thank you. We have been working with the Community Improvement Corporation for several months on cleaning up the revolving loan fund rules and procedures. They were pretty dated, and there was a lot of inconsistencies throughout them that have been added over the years. And so we did a deep dive to really clean up the language. And that is what we're now calling, and we also wanted to recommend, excuse me, a new program. And so we have the existing program renamed to be, I want to get the name right. The existing program will be growth and startup loans, and those will be for loans that are over $10,000. They operate exactly the same as our revolving loan fund does now, just with cleaned up rules and procedures. And then we are recommending a new smaller loan program called Improvement and Retention Loans. And this new loan program is being recommended for up to $10,000. And these would be for small capital type projects to help a business make improvements. It might be new lighting, it might be a new point of sale system, you know, something along those lines. And a lot of the application process is the same, but it would be a little bit more quick, a quicker process, if you will. But the goal is to try to get these funds out into the community and used for business startup and growth in our community. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Let me ask if there's anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution before council.
There is not. Thank you.
All right, council questions and discussion. See Councilor Ryu's hand.
Just with the local multiplier effect of what happens with where the money stays in the community, if it's a local independent business that is not a franchise or chain, is that written into this language to that the businesses that we're helping are local independent businesses?
It does say they have to be within the city of Oxford. I do not know off the top of my head if we have, I don't think we have a no franchisee rule in there, but there's a committee that vets each application, both a small revolving loan fund committee and then the full Community Improvement Corporation. And the people we've funded to date have been small, locally owned organizations that no one else really wants to take a risk on, but the city's willing to. And so we've helped a lot of small businesses get started that way.
Sure. I mean, with the exception of Buffalo Wild Wings is one of them. And I know the old, wasn't it, for the revolving loan fund, that was one of the earliest recipients.
That was before my time, so I'm sorry, I can't.
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure that never happens again.
Joe, do you want to speak to that? Yeah.
Yes, I will. At that time, there was a small business in Dayton. I just happened to know it because my cousin was the one who came here and opened up the B-Dubs here in Oxford. And it wasn't a company-owned store. It was a franchisee. So I think that was a reason at that point that they felt that it was a franchisee and they weren't supplementing a corporate store is the reason, is my guess, is why they approved that. Okay. Like I said, I just know that because my cousin ran it. So, and they sold it to the corporate. So now it's corporate. And now they're doing the same thing with taco places in Ohio and surrounding communities. But they're a group that actually just starts up franchisees. And once they get them going, they sell them or get rid of them. They're more interested in just developing new options for people in the cities where they locate. Thank you.
Let me get Councilor Southard, then Councilor Prithridge.
Yeah, I think this is great for economic development, and I appreciate the work that went into it. So I thank Councilors Ellerby and Prithridge for introducing this, and I thank the city for moving forward on this good work. So thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, David, and anybody else involved.
Mr. Prithridge.
So yeah, it was easy work for those of us who sat on the CIC because Jessica and others worked so hard on this. I mean, I think we have the revolving loan fund because we want it to get used. And so I think this will make it easier for people to apply. It will streamline the process. Yeah, because having that money sit there is not the goal of the revolving loan fund. And we've seen how many of the businesses that we really value have started and wouldn't have happened without this kind of funding that a bank might not make. The city's willing to take a risk sometimes on small local businesses that big banks won't. So I hope that we see more money used that way. So thanks to Jessica and her team.
Mr. Ellerby.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Jessica and her team as well, because Oxford needs to have economic development agility. I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that a lot of other municipalities in Butler County are moving very quickly and very aggressively to expand their economic development as well as the amenities they have in their city to attract people. And especially with the last year that we've had, a lot of individuals are realizing where you are might be where you get stuck for a year. So a lot of people are looking to get those kinds of amenities, and as long as we have the ability for businesses to open and for businesses to stay open, we become a municipality of choice for a lot of things, whether it's commercial or residential. And it's small changes like this that really go a long way to facilitating those kinds of options.
Let me see, Assistant City Manager Green, get your hand raised.
Speaking of my team, I want to give a shout out, especially to our intern, Luke Schlakey, who did the deep dive. He was the young man who really retyped all of this, got the language together, and then we worked with Seth Crookenbaker and some help to get everything fillable online, you know, those kind of things. So thank you to them for bringing this ready to all of you. So, thanks.
All right. I agree. It looks great. It was great to see the final format and the streamlining. So I look forward to seeing some new applications. So if there's no more questions or discussion, Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll.
Ms. Southard?
Yes.
Mr. Bracken?
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby?
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge?
Yes.
Ms. Ragu?
Yes.
Mr. Snavely?
Yes.
Mayor Smith?
Yes. That resolution is adopted. We will move on to our fourth resolution. Ms. Eaton, you may read it whenever you're ready.
Resolution redirecting the expenditure of $11,443 of Federal CARES Act funds, which shall be used to create a vaccine incentive and education program to encourage those who are vaccine hesitant to be vaccinated.
Motion to adopt. Motion to adopt by Councilor Prithridge, second by Councilor Bracken. And I will turn this over to Assistant City Manager Green.
Oh, thank you again. So this one is, we had a line from the CARES Act that was set aside to assist with COVID testing, and it really hasn't been used in the past couple of months. And so we've been thinking really hard about how do we help our community get vaccinated as just one of the most important ways to get our economy back and moving again. And so we're planning to we're working closely with McCullough Hyde, and we're going to be doing mobile clinics at Parkview Arms, the mobile home community, at the Presbyterian Church, the Methodist Church, and the Bethel AME Church are who's lined up already. And we're trying to get a few other of our mid-sized businesses lined up to go in and do vaccines on site. And then as part of our research, we've really been reading a lot about what are other communities and states doing to incentivize or encourage vaccines. And part one is education, that they're safe and based in science, and trying to get influencers to help get people vaccinated. And then step two is possibly the use of incentives. And for lack of a better phrase, but cash sometimes speaks. And so we thought this could be a small pilot program with the last bit of the CARES Act dollars to see if we can help get more of our residents vaccinated. So that's what we're thinking, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, let me ask if there's anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution before council.
I do not see any. Thank you.
All right, let's go to council discussion. I see Councilor Southard's hand raised.
Yeah, my question is, I'm really enthusiastic about having the mobile units, going to where people live to help to vaccinate them and to offer them the opportunity and educating them. And I would like to ask you if you are going to be able to offer it after working hours, because I think that some of these places are, they're only open from 9 to 2 or something, and people are working and they can't get to it. I don't know if that's a problem for anybody that we're talking about, but it would be nice if we could offer a variety of hours to make that more available. And I wonder if you've thought about that and if that's possible.
Yes, actually, thank you for asking that question. I should have mentioned it earlier. Yes, we are thinking of weekends and evenings and off hours, just trying to be home when people are home. And then in addition to that, we're creating like door hangers / door stickers that will go around with a team of volunteers and put on doors and say like, okay, we're going to be here in 2 days. And then the day of, we might also have volunteers who are willing to go around and be like, knock, knock, we're over here. Like right now, if you want to come right now and get your vaccine. And so that's the kind of details that we're working out right now. But we're hoping to get this going very soon.
We get Councilor Snavely, and then we'll get Councilor Ragu.
So I'm enthusiastic about the mobile units going out to where the people are. I think that's exactly what we need to do. I've got some other questions, and some came up off of citizens on Facebook who were, I just thought I'd throw it out there for comment. And others is from my own research. And so my questions are primarily about the gift card portion of this. And so part of the questions that I heard were gift cards to where? Are they local businesses? I assume that they are, but are they?
So we thought about a lot of different models. And currently what we're leaning toward is, to be quite honest, just a Visa gift card, because we didn't know how to like favor all the local businesses with the amount that we have. And so we thought that giving Visa gift cards would be the most easy and also equal way to address that. And then it would be at their second shot. One of the models we've got rid of that idea. It'll be at the second shot that they're eligible for the vaccine, or for the incentive, excuse me.
Okay. I've got about 6 or 7 questions, so bear with me. And how much money is going to be in each of these cards, and how many people do we think we're going to be giving them out to?
So we've really been exploring around $50 to $100, because the articles that we've been reading are like that. To get someone to change their mind, it really has to be an amount that they're like, I'm willing to change my mind. And so that's why we're going big. And so that would make it between 100 and 200 people with this amount of money, if I'm being honest. And so we're really trying to do this just at these targeted mobile locations as our approach. But again, truly open to your feedback, but that's what we're thinking right now.
Okay, the rest is commentary. So here's my, and I'm willing to be persuaded, but I have to say that I'm inclined against this, and here's a couple of reasons why. I don't know, and a lot of people who've talked with me don't know why we're rewarding the laggards instead of the people who fought like hell to get their vaccine. They stayed up late at night to get on there just in time. They waited in long lines, and now there was no reward except the knowledge that you're vaccinated and you're safe and your family's safe. But now we're saying, well, if you were a laggard and you didn't do it, and you were either lazy or you were anti-vax or you had another issue, hey, we're going to pay you $50 if you come and do it. So I have a problem with that. We're not giving any kind of a reward to those who were early and were successful and helped resolve this pandemic. And I guess I'm also concerned about the many countries around the world, like Japan only has 1% vaccinated. They don't have the vaccines across the world like the US does. We've got it, a largesse of it. They're begging for it. And we're saying, well, we're actually going to give $1 million in a lottery to people. And we're going to give them $50 or $100 in order to just to get them to do it. I have a problem with that. And I've also been doing some reading on the evidence of whether this works or not. And it's mixed at best. Most of the studies that I saw indicated that people who were not going to get the vaccine were not influenced at all by the monetary. And in fact, a lot of people who said, well, when this came up, I did go out and get it. Well, did you do it because of the? No, I did it actually in spite of the monetary reward. So I guess what I would like to do is to put the money to its best use. And I think that the best use is definitely the mobile units going out to where the people are. If we're going to have music festivals, then we can do it out in the main park on Red Brick Fridays. It would be a good idea, I think, to have it there. I'm all for that. And let's see if maybe that doesn't just work without doing this. And then we could maybe give money to the food bank. Maybe we could give money to people who have been evicted from their homes. Maybe we could put that money towards cold shelters in the winter for people who can't make it through that time. So I think there are better uses for that money. I'm willing to be persuaded, but I'm skeptical.
Councilor Ragu, and then we'll get Councilor Bracken.
I love this. I think this is so creative. And to quote one of my friends who's on Austin City Council, he had said, vaccine equity means meeting people where they are with vaccines. And this is exactly what this is. And I mean, there's a lot of distrust in government in general. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So I think it's great about the Visa gift cards, and just that you're right, that is the most equitable thing. And people can decide if they want to put that towards their utility bill or their water bill or their rent or whatever. And I guess the only thing I would ask is, I wonder if there might be healthcare workers in these areas that we can reach out to that could help spread the word. So it's one of their neighbors trying to encourage people to do it. I would be willing to, if you want me to try to reach out to people, I can definitely try to find those people. But I think this is so cool and it's creative, and yeah, I love it.
All right, Councilor Bracken.
Yeah, I'm in support of this. I agree with the sentiments Councilor Snavely made. It's sort of a prodigal son situation in which we're sort of rewarding those who are having trouble, but you need to help those who have the need. And that has net benefits for everyone. There might be questions of efficacy, although I tend to think that this will be effective. And I also think that when you're getting responses back, people tend to change their answers because of psychological biases that make it easier for them to accept if they said, I was going to do it anyway. So I'm generally in support, because I think despite them being lagging and not doing what they should have done immediately, if it ends up helping people, if it ends up saving lives, which I think it would or could contribute to, I'm in support of it.
Mr. Prithridge.
Oh, sorry, and I should say that if there is a way to use that money to reward those who have gotten it, though I doubt we have enough there to do that, that would be great too.
Mr. Prithridge.
So yeah, I understand. I am in support of this, and there's no discussion here about the proportionality of how much of the money will go towards the mobile versus the gift. The mobile is the most important thing. But I really do think about sometimes, now that we have vaccines that can go as low as 12, we might need to convince some adults so that some kids can get vaccinated. And so if it takes some amount of money I don't think we should be rewarding laggards, but I think as a society it will have been money well spent. So I'm in support of it, and I don't anticipate abuse. And if it gets more shots in arms, then I think, again, it will be what the CARES Act was supposed to be for.
Let me get Councilor Southern, and then we'll get City Manager Elliott.
I just want to say that that raises the important point that I hope that part of this educational effort goes toward getting the vaccine into the arms of people from the ages of 12 to 18 who are now eligible. And I hope that that is part of our effort, because I think that there is some resistance in that area too. So I think that the main part of this money and this project should go to the mobile units and to encouraging everybody to get the vaccine as soon as possible.
All right. City Manager Elliott, then we'll get Mr. Ellerby.
Just three things here. First off, we had a long discussion, debate about this. And, so I understand where Bill's coming from. And of course, part of the problem is we really don't know why they're not getting it. We can only look at national polling and come up with some ideas. But keep in mind that our goal here is to get more people vaccinated. If you look at the state of Ohio, I think they're up to almost 43%. And within Butler County, we lag by about 3 percentage points. We're at 39.8 when I last checked. So, and also it has slowed up as far as people wanting to get vaccinated. And the third thing that I want to just point out is we're also, planning to do some education. So this is something we wanted to bring to you tonight so we could move forward with the goal of getting more people vaccinated and educated. And we will focus on the mobile units and the after hours. And so I think this is a good program. Is it a perfect program? No.
All right. Mr. Snavely.
So I'm not convinced. If this were for education and for mobile units, I would have been a co-sponsor of it. And I think that being out there will get the result that we want. I am reminded of a discussion I had with someone who will remain nameless, who is a union member, and the union was contacted by the management and asked, well, would your members get the vaccine because there's low cooperation? What if we gave you $100? Oh, that sounded pretty good. Except that the union member said, hey, if they're, and this is serious, true, if they're going to give us $100, let's bargain for 500. And then he said nobody was going to get the vaccination until they got $500. And so it actually ended up slowing down vaccination rather than speeding it up. If we offer $50 and we have a poor response, are we going to up it to 100? See where I'm going is people should be doing this for the right reason. We want them to be vaccinated, but if they're against vaccinations, this isn't going to help. It's not going to do a thing. If they are just, I haven't gotten around to it, I might go, well, maybe so, but I think if they were in their space where it was easy for them to get to it, they would go ahead and get it anyway. So I remain very skeptical. So when I vote no on this, know that I support the education. I support going out to where the people are. I'm just not on the gift card.
Let me get Mr. Ellerby, and then we'll come back to Mr. Bracken.
I can't really agree with this either. And similarly to Mr. Snavely's comments, I am all for the mobility and the education and the providing the easiest option for anybody who is choosing to want to get vaccinated, but may have some life situations that get in the way, and that's what's causing them not to go get it. regarding any incentives, monetary or otherwise, that in my mind runs into an equity issue, because all the people that decided to be good stewards amongst their fellow men are not getting rewarded for this. And those that are choosing not to are now receiving these incentives in the forms of monetary issues. And just like Bill said, they're going to push. And I don't want to see that. So it's like, if that portion of it wasn't part of this bill, I would have said yes, but because it is and it's a package deal, I got to say no.
Okay. Mr. Bracken.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're not going to be bargaining higher prices on this. That's not going to happen. I don't think that's even remotely in the realm of possibility. It either works or it doesn't. I would argue that, one, it's not a binary situation. You certainly have anti-vax people that won't take it regardless. But I think there's a good portion of people who are hesitant and truly hesitant and can be moved. And I also think that the reason that vaccine right now is being reduced is not because people haven't had the opportunity. I think it is hesitancy that's causing it. And I think this might make the difference. And if it comes down to potentially saving lives, I'm not worried about the justice equity part of this, right? Saving lives is more important than me getting $50 or somebody else getting $50 because they did the right thing for the right reasons. I'd rather, potentially save a life there.
Councilor Ragu.
I mean, the reward that I got when I got the vaccine was not dying. So I'm pretty pleased with what I got so far. But I think that, what Jessica is talking about with the incentives and what DeWine is proposing with the Vax-A-Million, there is something to it. They're trying to draw up enough attention so that people will be pushed over the edge, like what Jason was saying, to further make that decision to do it. And I don't know if anyone has friends here that have donated their plasma or their blood for money, but they wouldn't have done that if they weren't getting paid. And some people who, especially if they're maybe living in a higher density area, maybe that money will make a difference. So if we have this much money left and the vaccine is free, I don't see a reason to add an incentive to get more people to get a vaccine. I will not be jealous of them. I will be happy for them and happy for our city if we can get more people vaccinated.
I'm not jealous of anybody. If somebody gave me the card, I would donate it to the food bank. So it's not about jealousy. I just don't think it's right to be rewarding the laggards.
We get Councilor Southern, and then I'll get City Manager Elliott, and then I have a couple thoughts.
Well, I hope that most of the, it's $11,000 plus. I hope most of that money will go to the mobile units to administer the vaccines at various times. And that means paying whoever is working probably overtime because they're doing in the evenings or volunteers or whatever. And I hope that that the incentives they sound very small and it doesn't seem like that big a deal. That's very different from the $5 million lottery, which is, an idea that I'm very opposed to, which is basically offensive to all sides. So that's very different from a $50 card. So because people have been, those who are gambling have been gambling with their lives anyway, and now they get a chance to gamble for $1 million. That doesn't make any sense at all to me. But this small incentive, I would like to see more incentives for everybody and more money going to people that would boost the economy a little bit, not just to those who are willing to finally to be vaccinated. So I think that we have to use the stimulus money in wise ways. And I think that using it for mobile units and going to the where people live is the most important thing. So I will be voting for this.
Mr. Elliott?
Yeah, may I suggest to council that maybe Bill or Glenn could offer an amendment to the resolution to exclude the incentive. We vote on that. If that doesn't fail, then I guess we would have the votes to go ahead with it as it's originally written. Does that make sense?
I'm glad to make that amendment, but I don't think it's going to change anything given the comments that have been made. But I would move to amend the third whereas. So it says be redirected to create and scratch a vaccine incentive and to create an educational program to encourage those who are vaccinated. Also, the mobile vans aren't even mentioned in there. I don't know whether they're no cost or what, but I would somehow put that in there if there is a cost attained to it.
All right.
Seconded.
All right. We have a amendment and I have a second. Ms. Eaton, will you call the roll to vote on the amendment proposed by Vice Mayor Snavely?
Mr. Bracken,
No.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
No. No, I'm sorry.
no? Ms. Ragu,
No.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes,
Mayor Smith.
No. So is that 4-3? The amendment failed.
It failed, yes,
All right.
4-3.
All right. So if there are, and I just wanted to point out that the first stops for this program are the Parkview Arms and the Miami Mobile Home Park. So those seem to be our most underserved communities that maybe couldn't get there for economic reasons or transportation reasons or working two jobs reasons. So if we give those communities an extra $50 a person, I'm fine with that. So, all right, Ms. Eaton, would you like to call the roll on the original resolution?
Mr. Ellerby,
No.
Mr. Prithridge,
Thanks to staff, yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
No.
Ms. Southard,
yes,
Bracken,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. Resolution is adopted. We will move on to our fifth resolution. Ms. Eaton, you may read that whenever you're ready.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 5-year contract with Axon Enterprise Incorporated for the purchase of 28 body-worn cameras and the associated docking equipment, data storage, software licensing, and support for the police division at a cost not to exceed $26,708.44 per year or $133,542.20 over the 5-year life of the contract, subject to the law director's approval of the contract.
Move adoption.
Second. Second by Counselor Southard. All right, I will turn this over to Chief Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This resolution that involves purchasing new body cameras is something I'm actually going to turn over to Lieutenant Jeff Robinson. He's our point person for body cameras. He's helped implement and run the program since its inception. We're in about our 4th year of that. And he also has done a great deal of research on this, not only at work, but during his master's program, he did his professional paper on body cameras. So I think he's better prepared to present it. And we also have the Axon rep, Amber Stanton, on the line if we have any questions. So I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Robinson.
Good evening. Thanks, Chief. Mayor Smith, members of council. As Chief said, we've been running a body camera program here at the Oxford Police Department for about the past 4 years. In August of 2017, we presented a proposal to the City Council, which was approved for the purchase of cameras through VView Safariland. Those cameras have served us well. However, we have reached the end of their useful life. In addition to that, VView was purchased from Safariland by the Axon Corporation several years ago, and we were notified during our contract with VView that at some point in time at the end of our contract, we would need to look at the migration from the VView software platform and camera platform to the Axon platform if we wanted to continue with their products. So we've evaluated their products, not only back when we did our initial research for the body-worn camera program, but we've done our due diligence recently with their latest camera. In fact, I'm in a course this week with another agency where they are running all Axon products, and we had a great discussion about it, and all the comments have come back very positive. Part of this package would include all of our software and data storage. Just so you have some figures in front of you, we're looking every year we store around 5 to 5.5 terabytes of data from our camera footage, and this is thousands of videos that we just simply don't have the capacity to manage here locally. So we need to partner with an organization such as Axon to manage that for us. We do set up all of our parameters via our policies, which do comply with the Ohio Collaborative Certification Standard number 4. It just makes life very easy for us to automate that through a software platform. As part of the 5-year deal, we will get a new camera set up at year 2.5. And then at the end of the 5-year contract, we will again get a refresh of new cameras. So the camera technology will continue to be refreshed through Axon and hoping to keep us continuing on after year 5, much like you do with your cell phone company. You pay a little bit for the equipment, and then you pay every month or year for the service. So very, very similar model of business. I'm happy to take any questions. And again, thanks to Amber Stanton for being on and sticking with us this late to move this project along.
All right. Let me ask if there's anyone from the public who would like to address this resolution before council.
There is not. Thank you.
All right. Council questions and discussion. I see Mr. Bracken, and we'll get Councilor Ragu and then Councilor Southern.
Yeah, I was just wondering if these also have a pre-recording technology so that they're recording prior to when an officer activates it.
So these cameras do. That is a difference from the cameras we currently are using, where the activation switch covers up the camera lens. These will have a pre-record video spooling. The audio won't start until the officer actually pushes the button, or there's some other reason for the cameras to activate. There are some new, very, very latest and greatest technology on these that we'll be exploring more and more as we move forward. But there's some automation we can build in to have cameras activate based on certain events. So we may be coming back to you at a later date for some additional equipment. But for now, we want to get into the cameras, get into this process where we are in our situation with the VView system. So we may be coming back to that.
How long does it pre-record prior to?
So we can set that parameter, and that'll be something that we adjust based on policy decisions. Our policy right now, like I said, is a approved policy through the collaborative, so we will need to work with them on that topic.
Sure. Do you know what it's capable of?
I think there is, and I think it's anywhere between 30 seconds and 2 minutes.
Okay. Thanks.
Councilor Ragu.
Those are good questions, Jason. I have a few questions. What do you mean by the useful life? Is it because of the storage capacity? Is that where or is it battery?
No, it's battery, it's equipment. So I've got actually one of our current devices on my desk right now. This is actually my camera. And what you see on the back is some plastic pieces that do break. The slider door is something that we have replaced on numerous devices. And those are things that we cannot replace. I can replace a clip on the back pretty easily. I cannot replace the battery. I cannot replace the ports on them, and I cannot replace these slider doors. And we have gotten to a point where trying to return them to VView to get new devices is not a reality. I think I have 3 or 4 cameras that we've sent out on RMAs that we just haven't gotten back. So we did purchase a small stash at the beginning of the year, knowing that we were going to be going down this road kind of outside of our contract without that support there, or warranty support. So we do have a small stash here, but we are quickly going through those cameras.
And then are we selling this old equipment so it can get reused, or?
We can put it available as surplus equipment. I don't know that it's going to be of use to anybody unless they're operating their own server. Part of this is VView. We're going to lose that that cloud storage that these go to. So kind of like a cell phone company used to have a 3G cell phone. It's not able to work on the network anymore. So very, very similar. We'll
Okay.
find a way to recycle them or
Awesome.
them
And
on
then
surplus.
nature sustainability, great. That's my next question. And what do you mean by the collaborative's going to decide? Who's the collaborative?
The collaborative doesn't decide. However, we do submit, I think there's 8 right now policies to obtain Ohio Collaborative certification. That is the state, so to speak, accreditation board. I don't want to, that's maybe a bad term for it, but it is the board that we submit our policies, and they review not only what we do with those policies, but how we keep up on them, our audit logs, things like that, to make sure we're in compliance. If for anything, and again, this may be a bad comparison again, but a state level PCRRC, if you will, a group of state level individuals that are not only made up of law enforcement, but community members throughout the state that have decided on standards that police agencies throughout the state should comply with. This is a volunteer program. You do not have to comply with it. However, as part of Chief's ongoing goal for transparency and legitimacy, that is something that we have strived to obtain every year. And when they come out with their new pillars, we do work very hard to obtain their certification.
Okay, so it's voluntary. So if you had elected to go for 2 minutes of pre-recording, there's nothing that would stop you from doing that if you made that decision. From
them, no. It's a matter of us reviewing policy, reviewing the weight of transparency with public, the private privacy of individual officers. You know, if they're sitting in their car and having a conversation or speaking with somebody, you know, is that something that we want to capture immediately and have stored as a public record for long term? I think what I've seen with the majority of the industry standards I've seen is the 30-second look back, which is a pretty standard look back period.
And you said it
cameras.
automatically triggers, I guess, if there's a loud noise or jostling, or what is that trigger?
So the trigger is a button. It's a large button that sits right in the middle of the camera. Again, I don't have one of the cameras in front of me, but it's a large tactile button. The officer does receive feedback. Both we can set it for audio and a haptic feedback. So much like the vibration on a cell phone, the machine will actually vibrate on your chest. It'll allow you to set that so it can continue to vibrate every 30 seconds, every minute, whatever we set that for, to remind the officer that camera is on. Some of the new technology that they've come out with, and I think this was part of the purchase of VIEVU from Safariland, is to partner with Safariland, who makes holsters for technology that when a weapon is drawn from a holster, it can activate a camera. There's a new beta, and Amber might correct me on this, but there's a new beta software that's built into the camera that when it hears a gunshot, it will automatically turn on the camera and activate the camera. There's also some new technology where if a camera is on in an area, anybody that is using the Axon Body 3, which is their latest camera we will be purchasing, as they come into a scene, it'll automatically turn on their camera as well. So there's some redundancies built in. Again, new technology, it's not infallible, but we're excited about some of the opportunities that this camera that it brings. There's some reduction I hope to see in efficiency, or improved efficiency, reduction in officer time with tagging. That has become a very, very laborious process for our officers with the VIEVU system, of making sure they're documenting all their camera footage, setting it for redaction, setting it for deletion after it fits our time frame and our parameters that have been approved by the state.
Thank you.
Let me get Councilor Bracken, Councilor Ellerby.
I was just going to highly recommend that we go with the full 2 minutes there. I think it adds transparency. There's been issues in other departments in which officers were caught planting evidence because of the pre-recording. I don't think that's an issue at all in Oxford, but having that extra 2 minutes gives us a little more security, and it provides us information and context to what's going on. So I'd highly, highly recommend that we max that out as much as possible. In fact, I'd prefer more than 2 minutes. I think it can just help clarify things.
I can, this is Chief Jones, I can appreciate that, but this is not where we're going through our policy, and I'll take that feedback, but there's a lot of other concerns and issues with it. So that's what he's referring to with the the collaborative, and we got to send it through the law director. So I understand that, Counselor Bracken, but if I walk out of the restroom after just using the restroom and then something happens, I don't want that captured on body cam. So we'll look into that issue, but I don't think this is the place to debate our policy on that.
I wasn't trying to debate it. I was just trying to let my position out there, although there are ways around that too, including independent review. So it doesn't just go out to the public. In fact, rarely ever do these things just go immediately to the public.
Right.
Councillor Ellerby.
Just a couple questions that are curious for me. What are the camera bodies made out of?
Amber, I may push that back to you, but I will tell you the difference between the cameras we use now and the AB3, which is what we're looking to purchase. The AB3s are rated to a military spec. They have a military standard drop test, so they can survive that drop. Right now, the VView LE5 light that we have now, our officers, the plastic's broken and they've fallen, hitting the ground and burst into many, many pieces. So there is no drop spec on this. However, the Axon Body-worn 3 does have a mil spec drop test rating. And I think what they do is to pass that test, you have to hold it out at 6 feet and drop it, and it has to survive that drop.
Yeah, I was just curious if it was plastic versus an actual like a fiber polymer of some sort. The second question is, I'm not sure if you can answer this in a public forum, but I was wondering how long those recordings get retained. Like you had alluded to, there's a certain standard that you adhere to. I'm just wondering, you can get with me offline, but I was just curious to know how long that was.
No, I can comment to that. That's our policies are public. I have no problem speaking to that. We maintain, and I'll say there's a lot of different reasons we may not maintain a video this long, but for the most part, all of our videos are kept for at least 366 days. There's a lot of discussion that goes back to looking at what some of the other policies are within our policy and procedure manual that give us reasons to keep them that long. There are some retention that get deleted in a shorter time frame. However, those have to go through a process in order for that to happen. We do have some incidental activations where those get deleted. It may be that I'll give you a great example. I was working on a cruiser last summer for an officer, getting their computer up and going, and my camera bumped on during that. It was completely incidental. It activated for about 20 minutes while I'm climbing around in the backseat of a car. It's 20 minutes. We don't need a video footage. I have a form that I submit to my supervisor, and in my case, it'd be the chief. If it was a sergeant or an officer, they would submit it to their supervisor, and it would go up to the chain of command for the chief executive to sign off on. Once it's been signed off on, we can remove that video if it has no value. And again, that matches our retention schedule, and all those things are set within our Ohio retention or Ohio Historical Society records retention schedule. I may have messed that up, but
you got it.
Yeah. And then the final statement that I have is, it's my understanding that our vehicles no longer have cameras in them due to the shift to these body cameras. And if you have the time and the inclination, I would love for you guys to get a quote to get those back into the vehicles, just because I'm a big fan of having cameras in vehicles.
So we've never had cameras in my career here in the cars. I think there was one car when I got hired that had a Grant camera built into it, but it did not function when I got hired in 2006. So that is not something we've had, but I will tell you, over the past 6 months of working with Amber, we have seen a number of technologies that they have. One of them being in-car cameras, as well as interview room technology that would bolster what we're doing, make things a lot more efficient, and moving large data files down to our prosecutor's office for case discovery. So those are projects we're looking at, things that we are continually evaluating, and how can we become more efficient in our operation and effectively get those things down to the people that need them. So yes, we are continuing to look at that. Again, there's a lot of cost associated with these things, but certainly we've never been afraid to bring these items to you when we feel that there's a need.
Well, I'm glad that you're working with the right person for the job.
All right, let me get Counselor Southard here.
Yeah, I'd like, I know you can tell me how this would work. There are events when you need outside assistance. So, there are occasions when you have to have other officers come in from other places. Will you be giving them cameras to use under those circumstances, say Green Beer Day or other situations where you get additional personnel to help? How will you deal with that? And what will you do if I see that it says 2 spare cameras for each officer and that there are 28 sworn officers. What if you don't fill the positions, or if alternately, if you decide to add positions? How does this contract work to deal with those contingencies?
So those spare cameras are actually stock that we keep. Those are overhead stock that we keep, and they'll probably stay in my office. Much like many of the things that we have, whether it be a cell phone, whether it be a body camera, whether it be police equipment, belt equipment, we keep over in our quartermaster storage area. Those are extras that if an officer, something happens, a camera comes off and gets run over by a car, camera breaks or it is technology. It's not infallible. If something goes wrong and that camera goes down, those spares allow us to issue those out to the officer while we send their issued equipment back to Axon to be reviewed, evaluated, checked. While we're in this 5-year contract, everything's under warranty. So if something breaks, we'll ship it back to them. I don't know how they'll process that, but I have a feeling that we will probably get a new camera sent right back to us, and they'll take a look at that and try to figure out as part of their evaluation what went wrong. So that's what those spare cameras are for. We don't issue those out to other agencies. Much like if Ohio State Highway Patrol were to back up one of our officers on a traffic stop, I think they are an agency that does have dash cams or in-car cameras. That footage belongs to them. That's their footage. Certainly, we have a mechanism for obtaining that footage down the road if we need it for our case. So we're not going to give those to other agencies to use. But there are other agencies that operate within our city limits that do have cameras, and we have ways to obtain that footage if we need it for a case.
All right. Any other questions? All right, Ms. Eaton, you may call the roll.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. That resolution is adopted, and we will move on.
Thank you, and thanks for Amber for sticking on this long with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Guys. We'll move on to ordinances, and we will go to our first reading. I will need a motion to remove this from the table.
So
Well,
moved.
I'm seeing here, okay. Second?
Seconded.
Second by Mr. Ellerby. Ms. Eaton, will you call the roll to remove this ordinance from the table?
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. Now, will you please read the ordinance?
An ordinance repealing ordinance number 3573, adopted July 14th, 2020, requiring face coverings in any public space within the city of Oxford, Ohio, to limit the spread of COVID-19 and declaring an emergency.
Move adoption.
Adoption by Vice Mayor Snavely, second.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councilor Ellerby. And I'll go to City Manager Elliott.
Well, thank you for removing it from the table. As we know, things have been changing. We have fewer and fewer average cases per day in Ohio. and also Butler County. Just recently, Butler County went from red to orange as far as the public health advisory system the governor has set up. I guess what I'd like to suggest, mainly because we've been getting a lot of questions, both from businesses and individuals about what we have in place. And there is some confusion, as I'm sure you understand. CDC has issued guidelines. And of course, their guidelines basically say, you must follow state and local regulations. So you're familiar with their guidelines. And then, as you know, the governor has stated publicly that he plans to repeal the health orders on June 2nd, which would be right before our next council meeting. So I think it might be time to repeal this, and then basically we can follow the state's lead on this. But I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. I know this is an important issue for us. I think we've done a very good job here in Oxford. We've done our part, and so I think we'd like to recommend that you go ahead and pass this, which would repeal our face covering ordinance. Thank you.
All right, let me ask if there's anyone from the public who would like to address this ordinance before council.
There is. Ms. Shaman, go ahead.
Good evening once again, Amy Shaman, 11 Heather Ridge Court, speaking on behalf of my family. I very much appreciate that action that the council has taken on the issues around COVID, and I completely understand that it's no longer appropriate for us to say there's a state of emergency when the state says there is not. However, we have not won this battle against COVID, and I would ask that there be some consideration of still recommending that those who are unvaccinated do what the CDC suggests and do wear face coverings in businesses, and that it not be something that people are pressured to stop. Only 39.61% of our county adults are vaccinated. I don't believe we have a statistic yet on the 12 to 15-year-olds. The CDC noted, I saw on NPR, they noted that children are growing by 22% of cases of COVID. It is the most growth there has been of cases of COVID for children in a long time. One could say that's probably a factor of adults, a higher percentage of adults being vaccinated. We would like to make it clear that I don't know that we're ready to say our community has fully conquered COVID until all of our community can be vaccinated. And I would encourage council to take that under advisement. We do realize that you have to do something because of what's happening at the state level. Thank you again.
Thank you.
There is no one else. Thank you.
All right. Council questions and discussion. Vice Mayor Snavely and then Councilor Ragu.
I support the resolution, and I assume that if we pass this, that we're still under the state rules until such time as they are gotten rid of. And also, I make the assumption that a private business can still have a rule about mask coverings to protect their employees inside. So with those provisos, I feel comfortable with it.
Councilor Ragu.
I don't want the comments that were provided at the last meeting to get lost because it was tabled last time and a lot of people had made comments about this same resolution. If I'm counting it right, it looks like there are 10 people who opposed getting rid of this, and then there was one person that was neutral. So just to throw that out there, those are the other public comments that were provided at the last meeting.
Councilor Southern.
Yeah, Mom, we have not conquered. Not enough people are vaccinated. We just talked about vaccinating more people. Children I worry about children, and we should all worry about children. I worry about people who are unvaccinated, either because they don't know better or because they just haven't gotten around to it. And I worry about the workers in the stores, in the restaurants and bars, who will be very vulnerable if we don't have a mask. It's so easy to wear a mask, and I don't see why we don't all do that for the protection of everybody. In addition, there are people whose immune systems are vulnerable. who have suppressed immune systems. Many people, they're at least, I read today in the Washington Post, at least 3 to 4 million people, they estimate, who have a suppressed immune system. You're not going to ask those people, but I know somebody very closely who has a suppressed immune system. That person is going to have to isolate now because we change our mask ordinance. That person is not going to be able to go to certain stores, is not going to be able to go to gatherings where there are many people. I don't think it's a good idea, and I will oppose it. I will vote no, or I would propose that we table this another 2 weeks and then vote on it when we have to. So I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but I would like to table it.
Get Mr. Prithridge, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I've been struggling with this, I think, as many of us have, because the guidance has changed so rapidly and more rapidly than most of us anticipated. I guess I would say that those of us, we passed this back in July because the science told us this was the good idea, and we followed the CDC and the governor's recommendations and acted locally, and I'm really proud we did. I think that transitioning away is going to be, I kind of feel like we have to follow the science on that too. And so I don't want to be out of step with the CDC and the state. I think that July 2nd, we could table and we could let the emergency order expire, and then this becomes moot then anyway. It does feel fast, but again, I'm trying to trust science to get us out of the masks and out of COVID as we trusted them to put us in. So it feels fast, but I want to put my trust in science, I guess.
Mr. Bracken?
Yeah, I mean, the CDC is not feeding us bad science, that's for sure, but there are other considerations. When I consider it, though, it's such a simple, minor inconvenience, and it could potentially have major ramifications. I would like to see us actually keep it for inside, but remove it for outside, because there is good science that says that's orders of magnitude less dangerous. I don't know if that's something that other counselors would be interested in.
I made a motion to table. Aren't we going to discuss that? Do we have a second?
I would second it.
All right.
If there's a motion and a second, then all discussion has to stop and you have to have a vote on it.
That's right. Ms. Eaton, will you call the roll to table the resolution?
Mr. Snavely,
No.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
No.
Mr. Prithridge,
No.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
No. So the motion is not tabled. So if is there any further, I see Mr. Ellerby's hand and I see Mr. Elliott's hand. We get Mr. Ellerby first.
So when we passed this mask ordinance last year, I said that I did not want to pass this, but I had to pass this for the safety of the majority of the population of Oxford. At the time, that was after the students had left, and the majority of Oxford is in the more senior category. Now we find ourselves in the same place a year later in drastically different circumstances, supported by the CDC and other scientists saying that the light is at the end of the tunnel and being outside without a mask on is an acceptable risk. So at this point, I think that we can make that change and we can allow people to at least get one more piece of normalcy back in their lives.
All right. Mr. Elliott?
The only thing that I was going to comment on is that the governor has said he would be lifting the public health orders, but he did not say that he was going to lift the public health emergency declaration. And our ordinance is written such that if that emergency order is still in place, then our ordinance is still effective. And so that's some of the discussion that we've had. And so I just wanted to bring that up.
Vice Mayor Snavely.
Dr. Fauci tells us, and the CDC tells us, that certainly outdoors, people who are vaccinated can go maskless without problem. And I think that if we had this ordinance in effect in light of that, that the citizens could very well just say, well, the whole thing is crazy. I'm not going to do it, whatever anybody says. And I think it's really hard for the police to enforce something like that. I was all for the mask ordinance. As you'll recall, I was very much a supporter of it. And that's because the science was there and the CDC and everybody was saying, this is what you need to do. And so now that they're saying otherwise, I say we go with science again. And then I think we have the trust of the people.
Councillor Southern.
Excuse me, but the science, the CDC guidelines also say that unvaccinated people should wear masks. And how are we going to know who's unvaccinated and who is? That's why people should wear masks, to protect those who are unvaccinated. And that means children, workers, people who have immune suppression, and just to protect other people. It's the kind and decent thing to do.
Let me get Councillor Prithridge, Councillor Bracken, Councillor Ragu.
I think one of the things is that I think we're going to go through a transition, which is it's about mandates by law versus social practices, and nothing about this prohibits people from continuing to wear masks. And it doesn't, businesses can continue to require them, as Kroger does, as a corporation. I think one of the things that we're going to have to shift from is things that apply to everyone to things where people can continue to, if you are immunocompromised or if you have a child, the mask is still a way for us to protect ourselves individually. But we're going to be transitioning into a phase in which we're not societally passing rules over everyone if a majority of people is vaccinated. Butler County's only 40, but I'm going to guess Oxford's better than that. But there are unvaccinated people out there, and we're all going to have to make a personal decision about whether we want to continue to wear them. So it's a transition, but it'll be hard to take off the mask as hard as it was to put it on in the first place, I think.
Councillor Bracken.
Yeah, I was also going to say what Ed mentioned, that, yeah, the CDC recommends masks for those who are unvaccinated, which is who this is for. And the more that we do it, the more that it's a social pressure and expectation for others to wear them. And so that's actually the biggest benefit, not just that you're doing it, especially if you're vaccinated. It's not that important at this point, but it helps promote it in everyone else. And I also think that it is really hard to enforce. In fact, we mostly have it, and I don't mean that as a failure on us, just that if you walk into any store, it's impossible to stop everyone who doesn't want to wear a mask from not wearing a mask. But what this would do is it would signal that the city is still suggesting that you wear them. And I think that's important. I don't think it would really change how we operate on it in terms of handing out fines or anything like that. But it would send the signal that, yeah, it's not over yet. The pandemic continues, and it's going pretty well here, but it's not going very well in many parts of the world. And so I think we need to keep that in mind. We need to keep those that are still vulnerable, as Councillor Southern mentioned, in mind.
Councillor Ragu.
Yeah, to echo that, I mean, exactly what Edna said, that's what the CDC says. And that is something, when you listen to their interviews from people in the CDC, they say, well, you have to give the people who got vaccinated something. It's to encourage people that, look, you can return to normalcy if you get vaccinated. So it was a give and take. This isn't that anything has changed. And I would completely agree with what Jason said. It's so different indoors than it is outdoors. We know this with the aerosolization, and there's so much more ventilation outside compared to indoors. It makes a lot of sense to change that. And I mean, we know that many countries, over 100 countries, don't have any vaccines. And this virus is really prone to changing its little spike proteins on the outside of its envelope. So all we need is a variant to come and spread worldwide. We're okay on the variants that are here now, but we are not okay from what might happen if we don't have better equity worldwide. So I am in opposition to thinking that we are returning to normalcy whenever that we're not thinking globally whatsoever. So indoors, where you are at a much higher risk of getting infected, especially if variants come that are much more infectious and can evade our vaccines, it is going to be a lot harder to get people to put that mask on their face than it is to get them if we get rid of this. And furthermore, I mean, all of the public input we've had, except for one neutral person, has been in opposition to getting rid of this. So I would be in favor of what Jason had said. I don't know if you're proposing that, to edit this so that it still includes, so that it pertains to the indoors and not so much to outdoors, just because that is what science says. And that is the more accurate thing to do. That would be in line with what the CDC says.
I'm willing to put forth that amendment.
If you can figure out where that would go, I might support you.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to quite word that, since we're repealing an ordinance that's for both. I'm sure we can fit that in, but I don't know quite how it should be worded legally.
Well, by parliamentary procedure, what I think you could do is you could move to substitute for the repeal, and the substitution would keep it in place and eliminate D, which has to do with outdoor spaces, and exclude. And you could, I haven't had the time to read through in detail, but neither have you. But I understand what you're trying to do. That's the only way that I would probably approve it. The comments that Chantel was referring to were before everything happened. It's before the CDC made the change and all of the comments that have been made. So, hey, I'm willing to go with Jason if you can figure out that, but I think the process would be to make a substitution, a motion to substitute.
Chief Jones, you have a comment?
Yeah, I hope it's appropriate. I apologize if it's not, but you know, one, you know, if we're measuring public comment, you know, I'm a citizen of Oxford. I try not to offer public comment because of my role, but my public comment would be that it's time to get rid of the mask mandate. But why I say that is because of the very practical concerns that City Manager Elliott raised, and that's you know, we could be sitting here on June 2nd, and technically by law, by ordinance, that's still in effect, because, you know, I don't know that executive order is ending. So that's one. And two, as far as public comment, I feel like staff is the one who actually receives the public comment. And something Vice Mayor Snavely said, I think people, if this stays on, people are going to look at Oxford as this is, I mean, we hear that. I hear it from business owners. You know, I heard it today from business owners asking what it is, because they want their vaccinated employees not to have to wear a mask. And so it's very confusing for them. It's very confusing for us. And quite honestly, I think we bear the brunt of the public rampage more than council does. But that's just my opinion, and we try to sort it out. So it's kind of hard when everybody else is following a different set of rules, but here in Oxford, we're following, you know, a totally different set. And I think people are very good natured in this town, will do the right thing, but it's going to make it difficult for the police. Not that we're out enforcing masks, but I think other citizens who know there's a local ordinance that says you should be wearing a mask inside, they're going to encounter people from visiting from another place, not wearing a mask, and there's more confrontations that we have to deal with, when I think, quite honestly, it's safer if people would just move on and mind their own business and avoid each other in those situations. But that's what I'm offering.
Let me get back to Mr. Pritherich and then Vice Mayor Snavely.
So, again, it's the difference between a law that's enforceable and some of the cultural and communication. And so, I mean, are we, I guess this is a question to Assistant City Manager Green, because she was kind of helped spearhead some of the communications efforts. I would love for us to continue to communicate with new signage about changing rules. So it's not that we're stepping away from masks, we're just using a different means other than the law. And so, if I vote for this, to the repeal of the ordinance, I would really love for us to use CARES Act money or whatever we have available to work with Enjoy Oxford to continue to communicate that unvaccinated people need to wear masks. And we work with our business owners, and we just shift to a new gear. We're not saying masks. I mean, everything we've saying, it's true. We should still be wearing them inside, but can we do that at the realm, if we're not already enforcing this, can we do that at the realm of communication? I think in Oxford, it may be as effective as any threat of enforcement.
Let me get Mr. Snavely and then we'll get Vice Mayor Green.
I agree with David, and I appreciate Chief Jones' comments. And I think that they both convinced me that even if there was a substitute, I probably wouldn't support it.
I'll just go ahead and say that, yes, I can do a whole new campaign of signage and education about the CDC guidelines and some of the nuance with there. I'd be happy to do that. And then I'll also second Chief Jones. We took phone calls all day long today from businesses. So they're not public comment that you guys are hearing, but we're answering phone calls about like, well, what's going on? And it is very confusing. And so I would also hope that we could follow what the state and CDC is doing. So, but I'll be happy to do an education campaign.
Great. Mr. Elliott?
And not to continue this lengthy discussion, but the state has an order in place now that says that individuals in the state of Ohio shall wear facial coverings at all times when in any indoor location that is not a residence, outdoors, and unable to consistently maintain a distance of 6 feet or more from individuals who are not members of a family or household. That's in place now. And so that's why I'm saying, follow the lead of the state. I think it makes a lot of sense. If you read our ordinance, it's confusing, and it was a good ordinance. I think it served its purpose, but I'd like to suggest that we follow the state's lead.
You saying, may I ask, that the state's rule would mean that people will be wearing masks inside restaurants and business establishments?
As long as this order is in place, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Bracken?
Yeah, I was just going to say something similar. So that would be likely till June 2nd, right?
Yes.
That's all.
Okay, are we ready to vote? All right, Ms. Eaton, you may call a roll.
Ms. Southard,
Yes, with that information.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Pritherich,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
No.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, our mask ordinance is repealed. We will move on to our first reading of the night. Ms. Eaton, you may read that whenever you're ready.
An ordinance amending ordinance number 3600, supplemental budget ordinance number 4 to make supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2021.
All right, I will turn that over to Mr. Newland.
Yes, thank you. First item has to do with to make an adjustment to the budgeted appropriations for part-time janitorial help, to move appropriations from budgeted operating expenditures to personnel expenditures. And that would affect both the police department and the municipal building. In our current budget, we had operating expenditures that were to assist our current one staff of one who does the cleaning and different things in the buildings, to have help to do some of the more deeper cleaning, I believe it was the emphasis of this. So this is just moving it from operating to personnel costs. So it would be easier for us to have a person that we would be overseeing to do these duties to make sure it's getting done properly. The next item is another small one. It's to make an adjustment to the appropriations for the purchase of a new memorial tree plaque from the unencumbered balance. The original budgeted revenue and appropriations was $6,000. Casey was able to get more contributions and is able to more replicate the existing tree plaque that we currently have. So this one would just increase contributions by $1,750 in the capital improvement fund and increase the appropriation side in the capital improvement fund by $1,750 in order to complete this task. The following one was also when we did our budget last year, the Miami Little League hadn't approached the city yet, and they did, and Casey and his group have in the past, but Miami Little League took it on themselves, but they wanted the city to collect the registrations for the Little League season, and we did that for them. The amount of revenue we received, which this ordinance would address, would increase recreation fees by $28,680. And we've already remitted those registration fees to Miami Little League. So on the expenditure side, it would increase the professional service line, which is where this was, where other money that we use for, say, soccer and such that we collect for is appropriated for expenditures. And we've sent the check for $26,672.40 to Miami Little League already, so they can start their season. And we were able to keep 7% of that money, so it actually increases the general fund revenue over expenditures by $2,007.60, which is the 7% fee that Miami Little League was willing to give the city to run the program for. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right, Mr. Snavely.
Just a quick question. Why does it say NA by the
I-
recreation program?
I'll fix that the next one. It was because I copied that from a different, the former one that we didn't have any revenue, so I missed that. I apologize, but it'll be fixed next time.
All right, let me ask first if there's anyone from the public who would like to address this ordinance before council.
There is not. Thank you.
All right. Any other council comments or discussion? All right, we'll see this again in 2 weeks. Let's move on to announcements and commissions. Thank you, Mr. Newland, and I'll go to Mr. Elliott.
Thank you. Just a couple things quickly. The county commissioners Monday adopted a resolution granting the annexation, and this is for the 22 acres, 3 parcels off of Brookville Road. So they did adopt an ordinance accepting they adopted a resolution granting this annexation. And so 60 days later, we'll be able to put before you an ordinance to accept the annexation. And so we're scheduling that for July 19th. And the second thing I wanted to share with you is we are going to schedule a work session before the next council meeting so that we can discuss the American Rescue Plan funding. Jessica's done an excellent job of collecting information from our nonprofits, ideas for sustainable projects. We've collected information from the public, and then we've also asked our department heads. So we'll have a lot of information to share with you at that meeting. And that's all I have this evening. Thank you.
All Right.
That virtual or in-person meeting?
Well, I'll leave that up to the mayor. I think he wants to make an announcement.
Mr. Dreisbach, anything you have tonight?
Thanks, Mayor Smith. The High Pedestrian Safety Project has begun. So High Street is closed east of Campus Avenue. And again, this is a project funded by a $1 million safety grant from ODOT, as well as Miami University funding the balance of the project. So there'll be new curb gutter, widened sidewalks, transportation improvements with bus pull-off area, traffic signal improvements, as well as pedestrian refuge islands. So traffic will be detoured. The project will be completed in early August in advance of Miami's fall semester. So hopefully we'll notice a few less trucks on High Street, and we can enjoy music festivals and such without so many trucks. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Chief Jones, anything tonight?
No, I'll just mention that on Thursday night, we have our Police Community Relations and Review Commission meeting at 7 p.m., I believe. And we'll be presenting our PCRC work group study there. And we'll also be presenting our 2020 data. So I would invite you all to watch that and the public to attend.
Thank you. Mr. Newland, anything tonight?
Nothing, Mike. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Waddell, anything from Parks and Rec?
Good evening, Mayor Smith and members of council. Two very quick updates. Number one, the Aquatic Center opens Saturday, May 29th. And not to put you on the spot, Mayor, but I did shoot you an email about kicking off the season as the mayor typically does with a big splash off the diving board. So if you don't mind letting me know if you're available to do that. If not, I see Chief Jones looks like he'd love to do that if you don't want to. So and update number two is as of yesterday, we have decided Freedom Festival will be back in Oxford this summer. It will look a little different, but we are going to put together an event for the community, and we will have fireworks, and we'll operate the pool that day and do some fun things. So more details to come, but it is back. So thank you.
All right, great. And for the record, I already have the pool opening on my calendar. So as soon as I can find my swimsuit, we'll be ready.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Chief Deathridge, anything tonight?
Nothing, sir.
All right, I will go to Assistant City Manager Green.
Hi, good evening. Very quickly, we are having 4 Red Brick Fridays this summer. So they start this Friday. And we're encouraging restaurants to come out and have tables on the street and things like that again. So we hope everyone will join us. Also wanted to let you know that I'm doing a lot of research with hybrid meetings to allow for public comment when we go back in person. But I do want to just be very honest with you. It will require probably a technology upgrade. And a lot of those vendors are really behind, and we have to kind of wait for the state to let us know if we're allowed to do it. So if we go back in person in June, people can be in person and still use our email public comment, but we might wait till thumbs up before we invest in purchasing microphones and cameras. Just something to think about. Thanks.
All right. Mr. Perry, anything tonight?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Eaton, anything from you?
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
All right, I will go to Mr. Mazur from our legal department.
Nothing this evening. Thank you, Mayor Smith.
All right, thank you. We'll start around. I'll start with Councilor Ragu.
I had a phone call from a Miami student who's part of the LGBTQ community and said they didn't quite know where to go to report some of the things that was happening to themselves and their friends. And that there's a lot of misgenderings that happen in Oxford, a lot of hate speech, and almost to the point where they felt like they were about to be beaten up, getting thrown out of bathrooms, that kind of thing. So as I thought about, what is the best way we can try to help change a culture of intolerance, from a community such as LGBTQ and then also ethnically, women and sexual assaults. I wasn't surprised to see what the Polco survey had said about who feels safe in Oxford and maybe who doesn't. So I'm not sure exactly what would be the most impacts of this person who so bravely wants to approach us and actually talk about this in a very public way to try to make it better for people coming after them. But it's something that, I think y'all should be aware of and something that we should be discussing here in the near future.
All right, let's go to Councillor Ellerby.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
All right. Vice Mayor Snavely?
Due to the hour, I won't take up much time, but I'm disturbed by what Councillor Ragu just shared, and I don't think that can stand in our community, and we need to stand up for those people because they're members of our community. They are we, and we need to support all those who feel threatened. And so I think every member of this council feels this.
Yes. Councillor Southard?
Yeah, I'm going to, even though we repealed the mask ordinance, I'm going to urge everybody to be very cautious and to not assume that the person you are speaking to is safe. It is clear that there are many people who, even though they were vaccinated, they still are vulnerable because of blood disorders and cancers and so on. So don't assume that everybody who is vaccinated is safe. So please wear your masks and please be kind to people and protect children and other people whom you might assume that they're safe, but they're not. So I just want to put that out there again.
All right. Councillor Bracken?
Just please get vaccinated. I could say a lot more, but that'll do for now. Please get vaccinated.
Councillor Prithridge?
Well, it is late and it's been a long night, but it's been long because we've been working on some of the hardest, trickiest issues of the past year. We started out by talking about policing and community relations. We talked about climate change, and we talked at length about COVID. And I guess I just want to say that I'm proud of the work that we do on council with our boards and commissions, with our really competent staff members and community members, to not step away from the hardest challenges of our time. And what we saw today, which was a great survey that showed high levels of satisfaction with the police, but we have some work to do. We've made progress in climate, but our work is just beginning, and we're not yet done with the challenges of COVID. But I think we should feel proud of the work that we've done and look forward to keeping working on these difficult issues. So thank you.
All right. I just have one thing to add tonight with our infection rates dropping and the infection rate in Oxford is virtually zero. I would like us to go back to the council chambers in June, starting on June 1st. We will take appropriate precautions with dividers and social distancing and do what we can to still encourage public comment virtually and through emails. So with that.
And how about the session that we're going to have in between then, the work session?
Work session.
That'll be public to face-to-face, yeah.
Yes, in person. All right. So may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Snavely, second by Mr. Prithrick. Ms. Eaton, will you call the roll so we may adjourn?
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. I know that was a lot, but we did a lot tonight. So I'll see everybody hopefully face-to-face on Friday, uptown in the open air.